Chapter 448. Yang Chendong didn't believe that Kuang Yi had anything to do with this. At the very least he shouldn't have been involved. That was why he asked Beta Persei to put Kuang Yi down. With Yang Chendong's order, Beta Persei reluctantly put Kuang Yi down. Kuang Yi coughed violently after he was released. Speaking of which, Yang Heir's strength was really great. That grab just now didn't have the slightest intention of being lenient. If he hadn't let go in time, it was likely that he would have suffocated to death in just a moment. After a series of violent coughs, Kuang Yi, whose face was still a little red, asked angrily, "What are you trying to do?" Kuang Yi only shouted angrily. He didn't ask too much because he realized that something was wrong. If Yang Chendong really wanted to harm him, he could have done it the moment he entered the room. Why did he have to talk for so long, to the point that the matter was basically settled before he acted? He felt that there must be some kind of misunderstanding. "What are we trying to do? Let's see what your men do first," Yang Chendong retorted. Although he respected Kuang Yi and some of the things he did when it came to matters of life and death, he wouldn't hesitate to kill. "I subordinates. Kuang Yi fell silent after saying this. Naturally, he didn't have the slightest ill will towards Yang Chendong. Especially when he still needed to ask for help, he wouldn't have any other thoughts. However, he couldn't control what his men wanted to do. If someone disobeyed him and wanted to do something, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to do it. At least before he figured out what was going on, he didn't dare to make any promises. Kuang Yi didn't say anything, so Yang Chendong didn't ask. Instead, he calmly sat back in his chair and looked outside. He believed that since there was a chance to send a signal, it shouldn't be too urgent. He just had to wait for the news. As long as he was fine, the Yang family army wouldn't be in a mess and there wouldn't be any big trouble. Yang Chendong quickly sat down with a calm look on his face. This gave Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei a backbone, and they were no longer as flustered as before. Although Kuang Yi didn't sit down, he had temporarily regained his freedom. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Not to mention other things, just this calmness alone was something that no young man could do. While they were waiting, the outside gradually quieted down. From the beginning to the end, not a single Ming soldier or general rushed over. From this point on, Kuang Yi sighed in his heart. How could he not? With his experience, he could guess that his subordinates had been subdued. Or else why would no one care about him, the powerful minister of the Ministry of War? Report. In less than a cup of tea's time, someone finally appeared outside the room in the inner courtyard. This person was no stranger to Yang Chendong. It was Ba Daojiang, who had joined the first guard squad not long ago. "What's the matter? Speak." As soon as he saw Ba Daojiang, Yang Chendong frowned. He knew that the first guard squad was assigned to protect his two wives today. Could it be that something had happened to them? Unconsciously, Yang Chendong's right fist suddenly clenched. He swore that no matter who it was, if anyone dared to have ideas about his wives or hurt them, even if it was related to the Southern Ming Emperor, he would never forgive them. Even if he was still not strong enough, even if he had limited military strength, insufficient population, and some of the foundations were not well established, he would still go crazy. Yang Chendong had the existence of a large warehouse. If he was forced into a corner, he would show everyone what a real cannon was, what a human meat grinder tank was, and what a high-altitude plane was. Yang Chendong's anger was conveyed through his tone. Ba Daojiang, who was half kneeling on the ground, felt a chill run down his spine. Recently, he was fortunate enough to become a member of the first guard squad and had more opportunities to interact with the sixth young master. It was because of this that this person who was younger than him always gave him the impression that he was very kind. It was hard for him to get angry, and even if the sky fell, he would not change his expression. However, now that he was so angry, it was as if he was a completely different person. Ba Daojiang's mind could not help but be in a mess. However, after all, he had been in the Jianghu for so many years, so he still had the basic skills to calm himself down. More importantly, he was now one of the sixth young master's men, and he was the kind that was fully trusted. With that in mind, Ba Daojiang tried his best to remain calm. Then he recounted what happened in and outside Lu Shi's shop. Assassination. Fortunately, they were fine. After hearing this, Yang Chendong heaved a sigh of relief. However, his tone was still strict. "Are the two madams safe now? Has the army entered the city?" Replying to the sixth young master, "The madams are very safe. They are under several layers of protection and will not be in any danger." 1st Battalion Commander Wuxia has already led the army into the city and is taking over the city's defense. Ba Daojiang reported what he saw along the way as well as what Captain Chiovi had told him. Unexpectedly, just as he said this, Kuang Yi suddenly spoke. That's impossible. I didn't hear any killing. The city's defense is also so tight. How did your army enter the city? Kuang Yi naturally did not believe it. This time he had been very careful when he summoned Yang Chendong for a meeting. The generals below were also afraid that Yang Chendong would flip out, so they had arranged everything beforehand. After Yang Chendong and the others entered the city, they had tightened the defense. General Yu Guang was personally standing on the city wall to prevent any accidents from happening. There were also hundreds of Ming Dynasty soldiers with him. They were already prepared and had a large number of people. How could they be taken down so easily? The key was that there was no sound of movement. This was something unimaginable. Kuang Yi did not believe it. Yang Chendong was unwavering. Since Ba Daojiang dared to say this, he must have seen something with his own eyes. As for whether or not they could complete this mission, he was not worried at all. During this period of time, the Lung Feng soldiers did not have any specific training. Their goal and mission was to quickly attack the city. When the chains and climbing ropes were taken out, the Gaozhou prefecture, which was not very sturdy to begin with, was not much different from their own backyard. Yang Chendong knew why the Lung Feng soldiers were called elites and how powerful they were. He did not doubt the report. His anxious heart finally relaxed, and his expression returned to its original natural state. All right, you've worked hard. Let's wait here together. Yes. Ba Daojiang replied respectfully. He took out the black 9-5 style from his back and stared at the door. He looked like a door god who could stop 10,000 men from entering the door. It was an awe-inspiring sight. No one answered him from the beginning to the end. Kuang Yi, who was bored, finally sat down obediently. However, there was a hint of worry in his expression. He could tell that the scout who came to report would not lie. If that was the case, wouldn't his soldiers be too useless? This time they waited for a little longer, but in less than an hour, the footsteps outside began to become more frequent. Then a few officers in camouflage uniforms with pistols on their belts walked in. The leader was the commander of the 2nd Lung Feng Regiment, Luopa. Behind him was the commander of the 1st Battalion, Wuxia. Because Kuang Yi was there, Luopa did not bow. He only gave a standard military salute and said, "Commander, everything outside is under control. The 4 gates in the city are also locked down. We are searching for the assassin's accomplices. There is no news yet. Let's go out and take a look." Yang Chendong nodded slightly to show that he understood. He then said to Kuang Yi, who was still in shock, "Minister Qing, shall we go and take a look?" Although this was a negotiating tone, Kuang Yi knew that if he didn't go, he was afraid that he would be forced into a fight. Moreover, he really wanted to know who wanted to assassinate Yang Chendong's wife and bring him such trouble. "Let's go and take a look. If the assassin is my subordinate, I will definitely give the Duke of Loyalty a satisfactory answer." Kuang Ye's words were very smooth. It was obvious that he had made up his mind. If the person who did this was really his subordinate who made the decision without permission, then he really didn't mind killing a few people to satisfy his appetite. Yang Chendong wanted Kuang Ye's attitude. Just like how Kuang Yi could not fall out with him, he did not want to fall out with Kuang Yi either. Following Yang Chendong, Kuang Yi and the others walked out of the room. When they arrived at the outer courtyard, they saw Guan Ying, Ma Wei, and the others with bruises all over their faces. They were tied up like dumplings and pressed to the ground. Judging from their clothes, they were covered in dust and Guan Ying's lapel was in tatters. They must have gone through an intense resistance. It was just that they were helpless. They were not as strong as others and would eventually be trampled under their feet. When Kuang Yi walked out, Guan Ying and the others who were still struggling to turn their heads instantly became obedient. This was too shameful. This was especially true for Guan Ying. The last time he fought with Yang Er, he was beaten quite badly. However, he thought that it was just a special case. If he encountered ordinary mercenaries with his skills, it would be easy for him to fight against 3 or 4 of them. But just now he was only facing a mercenary. He was still suppressed and beaten until he was pressed to the ground and could not move. Both of them were alone, yet he had easily dealt with him. It was no wonder that he felt ashamed to face anyone. Of course, if he knew that his opponent's name was Dao Shao, he would not be so depressed. He was the captain of the 2nd Guard team. For Yang Chendong to be able to make them responsible for his safety, one could only imagine how strong they were. Although Guan Ying was powerful, the intensity and method of training were completely different from the mercenaries. It was normal for him to be defeated. Chapter 449. This was also thanks to Yang Chendong telling all his subordinates before entering the city that they should not fire unless absolutely necessary. After all, the Southern Ming Empire was still their ally and even their superior. If not for this order, Guan Ying and Ma Wei would not be standing here alive after being hit by the flying bullets just now. Oh no. They were kneeling here. Seeing the subordinates, he was so proud of being pressed to the ground. Kuang Ye's expression became very ugly. However, at this moment he wasn't in a position to criticize them. He only walked in front of them and asked in a very strict tone, "Who sent people to assassinate the Duke of Loyalty's wife? Stand up now and I'll give you a quick death. If you don't speak and I find out, I can guarantee that your 3 clans won't have a good life." Even the 3 clans were involved. It could be seen that Kuang Yi was truly angry. However, no matter what he said, Guan Ying and Ma Wei had a confused expression. It was obvious that this was the first time they heard of this matter. Don't pretend to be innocent. If this old man finds out, don't think about living. Kuang Yi coldly threw down these words, but his heart relaxed. From his observation, these 2 generals shouldn't know about this. If that was the case, then perhaps the assassin really wasn't sent by his subordinates. Yang Chendong was also seriously looking at all of this. He almost reached the same conclusion as Kuang Yi. Some things could be deceived with words but not with the eyes. Of course, there were some people who were very good at acting. However, since they didn't admit it, then he would first go and see who the assassin was. As long as he could figure out this person's identity, he would be able to find some clues. The group of people walked out of the gate and went straight to the Lu Ru's shop. Along the way they could see a Leng Feng brother standing guard not far away. This was enough to prove that the entire Gaozhou prefecture had been taken over by the mercenaries. Kuang Yi knew that everything Ba Daojiang said was true. At this moment his expression was very ugly. Gaozhou prefecture wasn't very big, and Lu Shi's Rouge station wasn't far from the yamen. It didn't take long for the group to arrive. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, Hu Yen and Madame Shui, who were protected by several layers of people, rushed out and ran to Yang Chendong. "Darling, we're fine. It's just that what happened just now was really scary." It's okay. It's all over now." Yang Chendong hugged and comforted the 2 ladies. Then he said to Captain Tai Qingyi, who was slowly following behind him, "Send the 2 ladies into the carriage first." Female guards had already come forward to escort Hu Yen and the others to the car. On the other side, the first guard captain Qiu Vi, who was in charge of things here, also walked up to Yang Chendong and reported in a low voice, "Young master, the Phantom Sniper team has taken control of this place. It's very safe here and there are no blind spots. The Wolf Fong special forces have already chased after the other killer. With the city gate closed, no one can escape." Yang Chendong nodded slightly, indicating that he knew everything. Then he asked, "Where's the killer?" "He's here." Qiu Vi turned around and led Yang Chendong and the others forward. Then he added, "The killer's identity has been confirmed by people who know him in the city. His name is Immortal. Judging from his figure and underwear, he shouldn't be a Han or Miao person. He seems to be a Jiaoji person." "Jiaoji?" Hearing this inference, Yang Chendong's face flashed with doubt for a moment. "Yes, people from the security bureau just came over. Judging from his underwear habits, he should be a Jiaoji person without a doubt." Qiu Vi didn't just say it casually. This was the conclusion given by the security bureau personnel who were familiar with the situation of all parties. Yang Chendong nodded again. Countless question marks and possible scenarios flashed through his mind. Kuang Yi and the others who were following behind them heard the word Jiaoji and couldn't hear anything else. Even so, Kuang Yi still strode over. Other than Ba Daojiang, who was following closely behind him to prevent any accidents, the rest of Leng Feng didn't move at all. An old man in his 60s was nothing in their eyes, even if this old man was the Minister of War. Kuang Yi strode forward and tore open Imotuo's coat. When he saw the clothes inside, his eyes focused and he shouted, "Yes, he should be a Jiaoji person. This kind of loose collar is their specialty. I've seen it before when I dealt with them." The climate in Jiaoji was warm all year round, so the collar of their underwear was extremely loose. Unlike the Ming army, although the climate in the south was also hot, the collar of their underwear was still very tight due to military regulations. Yang Qindong could understand Kuang Ye's shouting and completely forsaking his bearing as the Minister of War. This was equivalent to eliminating him as a suspect. In fact, Kuang Yi had no motive to harm Yang Qindong at this moment. He wanted to borrow the strength of others, but he couldn't. Why would he try to kill him? Judging from this point alone, Kuang Ye's suspicions were greatly reduced. However, Yang Qindong wouldn't say it out loud. He wanted to make Kuang Yi hesitate. After all, this territory was under the jurisdiction of the Southern Ming Empire. If something happened here, it wasn't wrong to look for the Southern Ming Empire. After Kuang Yi shouted for a while, he realized that no one agreed with him and could only give up. However, looking at his complexion, it was much better than before. He must have known the truth and was now relaxed. The atmosphere at the scene became much quieter. Tiger's man had already found a chair for Yang Qindong to sit down. Then Chiovi reported what happened in detail. The sixth young master kept nodding as he listened. His gaze towards Tai Qingyi, Badao Jiang and Ping Yu also became much gentler. Yang Qindong's emotions calmed down and everyone couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Even Minister Kuang Yi, who originally didn't know what happened, looked much calmer. His mind was spinning rapidly as he thought about the origin of the current situation, the cause and effect, and what kind of impact it would have on himself in the Southern Ming Empire. Time passed quickly while he was deep in thought. About an hour later, the Wolf Fong Special Forces finally appeared. Captain Tai, who, along with his team members King Kong, Violent Ape and a few others, appeared with a relatively thin man in tow. The sixth young master. This is the person who ambushed the assassin and destroyed the evidence. He ran very quickly and took some effort. Captain Tai, whose voice rang out as the Langya Special Forces pressed the assassin to kneel on the ground. Everyone's gaze naturally fell on the assassin. However, even in the face of so many murderous glares, the assassin didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he looked at Yang Qindong, who was 2 meters away, and laughed loudly. "Brat, you dare to help the Southern Ming Empire go against our Jiaoji? Even if we can't kill you today, you won't have a good ending the next time. You will live in fear forever, huh?" After a few laughs, a piece of his tongue suddenly fell to the ground. He had actually killed himself by biting his tongue. Before coming here, Tai Hu and the others had carefully checked the assassin's mouth. After confirming that there was no poison, they were relieved to reattach his chin so that he could speak normally. However, no one had expected him to commit suicide by biting his tongue so straightforwardly. One must know that a person who could do such a thing so resolutely must be extremely ruthless. Perhaps it was easy for a person to be ruthless to others, but it was really rare to be so ruthless to oneself. After vaguely revealing his purpose, the assassin's mission was considered completed. He died in front of Yang Qindong. This scene shocked even Tai Hu. He quickly half-knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness. However, Yang Qindong waved his hand and stopped him. "Forget it. It's not your fault that such a person had the will to die." Of course, Yang Qindong could tell that the assassin was a man of sacrifice. From the moment he appeared, he did not intend to live anymore. He was even willing to live to see Yang Qindong just to say what he had just said. In the end, he just wanted to be a guide and point the way. As for his claim that he had been ordered by Jiaoji, who would believe that? Regardless of who had ordered him to do so, the possibility of Kuang Ye's instigation had to be eliminated. Whether the assassination of Hu Yan and Madame Shui was successful or not, it would only anger Yang Qindong. As long as he was not a fool, he would not carry out such an audacious plan in his own territory. "Minister Xia, I'm a little confused. I'd like to return to the military camp first. As for what we talked about earlier, please do it quickly." Yang Qindong stood up and did not apologize to Kuang Yi. "Although this matter was definitely not ordered by this person, it happened in your territory and within your jurisdiction. Based on this point, it would not be too much to wrong you." Of course, Kuang Yi understood this. He hated the uselessness of his subordinates for allowing the mercenaries to enter the city so easily. He also hated the fact that these assassins chose to act in Gaozhou Prefecture and implicated him. However, at the same time, he was happy. No matter who had sent the assassins, they had successfully angered Yang Qindong. Based on this alone, he did not need to urge these mercenaries to be ruthless in the future when faced with the rebel army of King Min. Gaozhou Prefecture, which had just been occupied by the mercenaries, was returned just like that. At the same time, Kuang Yi and his thousands of soldiers were given freedom. Teacher. Minister Xia. Seeing Guan Ying, Ma Wei, Yu Guang and the others' wronged and ashamed expressions, Kuang Yi waved his hand magnanimously. Forget it. It's not that you are too incompetent. It's just that the mercenaries are too powerful. From now on you will see the difference between us. Train well. Even if you had more than half of the mercenaries' abilities, the Southern Ming Empire would not have fallen into such a passive situation. Chapter 450. From Kuang Ye's words, it could be seen how optimistic he was about the mercenaries and how helpless he was about the Southern Ming army. The mercenaries protected Yang Chendong as they walked out of Gaozhou prefectural city. However, the sixth young master didn't immediately return to the carriage. Instead, he walked with the Lung Feng soldiers. He would do as much as he could to get closer to the military as he could. After all, the army was the foundation of a country. If he didn't have control of the army, then the so-called political power was just a joke. Seeing Yang Chendong walking casually among the troops, the people around him didn't relax. Especially Luo Pe, the leader of the second group of the Cold Front, they were extremely cautious. Even the safety of the 95 style on their backs had been removed. They looked like they were ready to fight any battle at any time. Feeling everyone's nervousness, Yang Chendong chuckled and revealed a very confident expression. There's no need to be nervous. As long as Kuang Yi is here, the Southern Ming army won't dare to be our enemy. Right now, their biggest enemy is still the Min King's rebel army. Since Yang Chendong, who had always been meticulous, made such a statement, the surrounding Lung Feng soldiers naturally relaxed a lot. However, at the same time, there were smart people who heard the different meaning in his words. For example, Tiger's Mane asked the question in his heart. Young master, if that's the case, they won't be our enemy now, but they will be in the future, right? When Tiger's Mane asked this question, the Lung Feng soldiers around Yang Chendong all pricked up their ears. Clearly, this was something they were very concerned about. That's right. Without making Tiger's Mane and the others wait, Yang Chendong nodded with certainty. But it's not that they want to be our enemy, it's that we want to be their enemy. Although the Ming dynasty is still prosperous, some of its policies are no longer popular. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize a boat. Everyone should know this. If we don't reform, then even if we don't do anything, other people will replace us. Yang Chendong's words were not alarmist. Although the great Ming dynasty in this period of history had only entered the middle period and gradually weakened, because of his appearance too many changes had occurred. For example, the division of the great Ming dynasty into the north and south was the most obvious difference. A powerful country was suddenly split into two halves. Whether it was military strength or economic foundation, they would all suffer a serious blow. In addition, the country's policies were already rotten to the core. Even if he did not make a move, the Ming dynasty would not last as long as it did in history. When Yang Chendong said that there was a problem with the national policy, he was referring to the policy of emphasizing agriculture and suppressing commerce. Although China had always been like this in ancient times, believing that agriculture was the foundation of the country, believing that all labor should be engaged in agriculture and not in industry and commerce. As the saying went, one more person engaged in industry and commerce meant one less person engaged in agriculture. It seemed like this idea was very reasonable. In fact, it was precisely because of this argument that the previous dynasties did not have a large population. Could it be that the monarchs in history did not see the benefits of having more people? Could it be that only Taizu said that there was strength in numbers and that it was easier to do things with more people? Of course not. With more people, it would be more convenient to do anything, especially the recruitment of soldiers. Whether it was the number of people or the quality of the soldiers, it would improve a lot. But why was it that there was a truth that everyone understood, but which dynasty would really implement it? Even when the country was stable, they would relax the training of the army and even the expansion of the personnel. In the face of the country's crisis, they did not even have a decent army. As a result, they were defeated again and again, losing political power and everything. Naturally, it was not that they could not see all this, but it was limited by the environment. The most important point was the food problem. There was only so much land and there was a limit to the food. If the population increased, there would definitely not be enough food to eat. This was the most important reason that hindered their development. For example, in the 100 years from the reign of Kangxi to the reign of Qianlong, The price of rice in Jiangnan had increased by 4 times, and the price of fields had increased by more than 10 times. For those poor commoners who did not have the money to eat meat, rice was their rigid demand. Then the problem was, what if they could not afford to buy rice? If they could not even feed themselves, how could they have more children and create a larger population? Fortunately, there were still sweet potatoes in the Qing dynasty. Although its taste was simple and its nutritional value was not high, it could still fill the stomach. Therefore, some people jokingly called the Kangxi and Qianlong age the sweet potato age. There was a certain reason for this. Therefore, in this way the land became the foundation of the country. How to let the people have more land and let them have enough food and clothing. When they were rich, naturally the country would be rich and strong. This was what people meant by hiding wealth among the people. But it was this truth that many people did not understand. On the contrary, soon after a dynasty was established, a privileged class would quickly appear. And this privilege showed that they would have a large area of land in a very short period of time. In the beginning it might not be much, but as they continued to develop, they would naturally have to seize more land from the people to maintain their power and enjoy a high and luxurious life. They had no choice but to compete with the people for benefits. Take Yang Qindong for example. After he was conferred the title of Duke of Loyalty, he also had his own legal land and he was given more than 5,000 mu. Because the Ming dynasty was divided into the north and south, in order to discuss Zhou Xian, Dai Zongqiyu deliberately gave the fief to Jianing in the south, making this fief impossible. But not everyone was like Yang Qindong, who was feared by the emperor. Most of the nobles who got their hands on land actually benefited from it. So where did these benefits come from? Of course, they could only invade the powerless ordinary people. As a result, the stable life of many ordinary people was broken. They went from owning land themselves to being tenants, which was to rent the land of the rich. Over time, life would become more and more difficult. In order to survive, all kinds of thoughts would appear and be produced. Think about it, when a person's life was a problem, what sense of responsibility and national honor did you expect them to have? For people like this, once there was a war, they would be lucky if they didn't turn around and fight against you. How could you expect them to work for you? More importantly, these privileged people were exempted from taxes. This was equivalent to completely wasting the best land in the country. If this continued in the long run, how could the country not be destroyed and how could it not be attacked by groups? This was the problem with the Ming dynasty's national policy that Yang Qindong said. And if this national policy was not changed, even if the Qing dynasty did not appear later, it would still be replaced by other forces. Then again, was there a way to solve this problem? Of course there was. As people often said, as long as one was willing to use one's brain, there would always be more ways than difficulties. At least in the face of the current situation, Yang Qindong had a way to solve the problem, and that was to walk with more legs. If a country wanted to develop, to be strong and to stand at the top of the world, it was absolutely impossible to walk with only one leg. It must be diversified. This meant that not only did they need agriculture but they also needed industry. Once the country was strong and the people were rich, everyone could live a life without worrying about food and clothing. Then who would think of rebelling for no reason? Even if there were some people who had such thoughts and wanted to bewitch others, there must be people who dared to agree. How many people would agree to not live a good life and take risks and even lose their heads? In particular, Yang Qindong attracted potatoes which had a high yield and could fill the stomach, which was tantamount to solving the problem fundamentally. Then, as long as the land in the hands of the powerful people was weakened and let the people have it again, these people would be guided to develop light industry, handicraft industry and heavy industry. Then they would be able to become rich. Then it would be good for everyone. Just like Yang Qindong himself, he was developing with such thoughts. All kinds of factories were opened in Xichen City, and the land further away was developed and planted with all kinds of crops. Moreover, with the mild temperature there, many crops could be harvested twice a year or even thrice. With food, work and money to earn, good days would naturally come. After that, it became a matter of how to ensure that the fruits of one's victory would not be taken away by others. Naturally, more people would take the initiative to join the army. Take Ling Feng for example. Pride was one thing, but more than that, they wanted to protect the fruits of their labor, protect their home. In order to achieve this goal, they would really put their lives on the line. This was a completely different concept from the Ming dynasty's soldiers who were paid. With the right path and a good foundation, and with the help of advanced weapons that were several hundred years ahead of the modern world, it was really hard to think of anyone who could be a match for them. This also created the legend of Lung Feng being invincible. Thinking up to this point, Yang Qindong's eyes were filled with hope and desire when he looked forward. In this life he was destined to bring the Han people to the peak of the world. No one could stop him. What happened in the prefectural city of Gaozhou was quickly discovered by the spies of King Min, who had been keeping a close eye on this place. After the news spread, the prepared lobbyist, the eloquent Qin Tian, went straight to Gaozhou Prefecture. At the same time, the secret letter written by Kuang Yi had also been sent to Nanjing City, to the front of Zhou Xian of the Ying sect. Kuang Yi actually managed to convince Yang Qindong, and more importantly his opponent even assisted him. Jiaozhi actually sent people to assassinate Yang Qindong's wife. This forced the Duke of Loyal Courage to do something even if he wanted to. Chapter 451. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yang Qindong only wanted the ships that were no longer in use by the Songjiang prefecture. Zhou Xian could naturally afford this price. He waved his hand and approved Kuang Ye's report. While sending someone to reply, he also informed the Songjiang prefecture to prepare for the handover of the ships and the preparation work to take out all the steel in the prefecture's inventory. Zhou Xian's side had a positive response. Qin Tian also came to the Miao army camp that was stationed near Gaozhou prefecture. Miao Jinlong was one of the leaders of the Miao tribe. Now that he had an army of 60,000, his identity was naturally noble. However, knowing Qin Tian's identity, he still warmly prepared a banquet when Qin Tian arrived. Qin Tian was one of the important strategists of the Min king. As the saying goes, there are 7 ranks in front of the prime minister. No one would want to offend a close official like him unless it was necessary. Not to mention he had come here to solve the problem in the first place. Naturally, Qin Tian didn't reject Miao Jinlong's warm hospitality. Not only that, but he also explained his mission during the banquet. He also wanted to hear Miao Jinlong's attitude and reaction. After all, they had fought with mercenaries before, so they should be familiar with this Duke of Loyalty. Miao Jinlong knew Qin Tian's purpose of coming. Especially when he heard that Qin Tian wanted to lead the mercenaries to the Jiaozhi kingdom, he raised his hand and agreed wholeheartedly. Due to the geographical location, the Miao people had always been at odds with the Jiaozhi people. Now that there was a chance to weaken the other party's strength, it was of course a good thing. Miao Jinlong was overjoyed. He called out the scholar Zoda and gave him a detailed explanation of what he had learned so far. From Zoda's words, Qin Tian had a better understanding of the mercenaries. He was even more determined to lead the trouble to them. Therefore he only rested for one night. The next morning he had someone send a letter to the mercenaries. First he stated his identity and the purpose of his visit. Since ancient times, there was a saying that the envoys would not be killed when 2 armies fought. But in reality the people who died as envoys did not know who they were. Before he understood the attitude of the mercenaries, mainly Yang Qindong, Qin Tian would of course not appear rashly. Even if the other party didn't kill him and handed him over to Kuang Yi, he would suffer a fate worse than death. Once the letter reached the mercenary camp, it was quickly delivered to Yang Qindong. When Yang Qindong saw that it was Qin Tian who had come to visit, he was only stunned for a moment before he smiled. It was really like someone delivering a pillow to him when he was feeling sleepy. After the discussion with Kuang Yi, Yang Qindong guessed that Zhou Xian would definitely agree to his request if he didn't care about the title of king with a different surname. After all, the king of Min's faction had directly affected the political power of the southern Ming dynasty. But Yang Qindong had been thinking about how to treat King Min's people these days. With the strength of the mercenaries, coupled with the sufficient weapons just sent by the marine, it is not difficult to deal with them face to face. However, if he really did that, the pressure on the southern Ming Empire would decrease and they would definitely consider dealing with him. This kind of strategy of swallowing wolves and luring tigers was not what Yang Qindong wanted to see. Just because he needed a large number of Han people, he couldn't fall out with the southern Ming Empire. Otherwise, even if he went on a crusade and conquered a large area of land, who would be in charge of it? Let the foreign race take over? This was absolutely impossible. If this was the case, it was unwise to be the enemy of the southern Ming Empire. What he wanted was to slowly digest and change, not kill a lot of Han people to show his strength or build a country similar to the Ming dynasty. If that was the case, it was just a change of dynasty. Once many years had passed, what was the difference between the Ming dynasty and other historical dynasties? The so-called Great Yang Chendong began to think about how to solve the crisis of the southern Ming Empire without making them too big. Once his strength rose to a certain level, it would be time for him to come back and reap the fruits of victory. After thinking for a few days, he finally had some ideas. If he wanted to do this, he must obtain the support of one person, and that is the Min king. As mentioned before, if Yang Chendong wanted to dominate and not just build a country, he needed a large number of people. Then how large is this large number of people? To put it simply, the more the better. According to Yang Chendong's intention, he didn't just want to conquer the Ming dynasty in the future. On the contrary, in order to maintain the growth of the population here, he might want to conquer this place in the future. What he wanted was not just Asia but the entire world. He wanted the Han people to stand at the top of the world. Wherever you go, your identity as a Han person is incomparably noble. If you are lucky enough to be born in a Han family, then you will be like a noble from birth. Wouldn't it be difficult to achieve this? Of course it was difficult. However, for the various advanced weapons in the warehouse, and the munitions factories that Xichen City had given enough conditions and books, the production of new weapons would only increase. As long as the quality of the army was good enough and there were enough numbers, firearms would have an absolute advantage over spears and swords. This also meant that this idea was destined to not be a dream, and there was a chance to achieve it. There was a problem. After conquering so many territories, how would they rule? That would require a large number of Han people to do it. Without people, even if they could conquer this place, they wouldn't be able to become the ruler of this place. It was just like when the Japanese entered China. How powerful were they at that time? They were even an existence that could sweep through the entire Asia. There were even times when they created an example where a few dozen people could manage a county with hundreds of thousands of people. So what? In the end, if they wanted to devour an elephant, their stomachs would explode. Although there were some other factors, it was undeniable that if they had enough people, they might be able to achieve their goal. Speaking of which, if they wanted to have more people, they couldn't make the Han people under the rule of the Ming dynasty their enemy. Otherwise, if they fought to their heart's content, they wouldn't have enough officials and soldiers who would listen to them and were loyal to them. Even if they destroyed southern Ming and Baiming, the country would still be in chaos. Once chaos began, who knew how many people would die and how many years it would take to restore the population to 60 million? Even if it was 60 million, Yang Chendong still felt that it wasn't enough. Fortunately, after the appearance of potatoes, the food problem of the people was greatly alleviated. Now, whether it was Baiming or southern Ming, they were encouraging people to have more children. From the looks of it, the country's population might increase exponentially in 10 years. The appearance of these new people might increase his chances of achieving his goal. However, the prerequisite was that the Han people's population couldn't be reduced for no reason. For this reason, Yang Chendong couldn't be enemies with the Han people under the king of Min for no reason. What he really wanted to deal with was the foreign race, Jiaoji. Jiaoji was now an ally of the king of Min. How to bypass them to deal with Jiaoji was the problem that Yang Chendong was thinking about these days. At this time, one of the important officials of the king of Min, Chen Tian, wanted to see him. If this wasn't an opportunity, then what was? Thinking about the appearance of the assassin Mo Tuo a while ago, he was from Jiaoji. In addition, there was more accurate information from the inside. Mo Tuo's attack was originally the decision of the king of Min's higher-ups. They wanted to kill with a borrowed knife. With this accurate information from the inside, Yang Chendong could guess the main reason for Chen Tian's visit even if he used his big toe. Or rather, this was what Yang Chendong hoped for. This was exactly what he wanted. Even so, Yang Chendong only kept the joy in his heart. On the surface, he still pretended to be indifferent. Never let your opponent know what you were thinking. This kind of person was truly qualified and an excellent diplomat. Young master already knows about this. Arrange for him to come over tomorrow. Tiger's Mane, go and contact him first. Yang Chendong didn't say much. In fact, he didn't need to say much. Tiger's Mane was one of the closest people to him. He always knew what he was thinking. It was necessary to wait for the right price to sell. Since he had obtained so many benefits from the southern Ming Empire, there was no reason for the king of Min to not do anything. Young master, don't worry. Tiger's Mane promised as if he knew everything. In the end, his role was the vanguard. At the same time, he was paving the way to raise the status of the young master. The mercenaries quickly replied and promised that Qin Tian could come to the barracks tomorrow to discuss the matter. They also said that he could come openly and didn't need to consider the reaction of the southern Ming army in Gaozhou. These words were a little generous. Not for other reasons, but through these matters, it could be seen that the relationship between the Duke of Loyal and the southern Ming Empire wasn't very good. The southern Ming Emperor Zhou Xian was very afraid of Yang Qindong. This was already public news. Now it seemed that it wasn't wrong. Qin Tian, who received a reply, was naturally very happy. He thought about how to persuade Yang Qindong when he saw him several times. He also thought about the possible unexpected situations several times. Early the next morning he brought a group of men and went straight to the barracks of the mercenaries. When they left the barracks of the Miao army, Miao Jinlong sent people to escort them. However, when they were about to reach the city of Gaozhou, the mercenaries in camouflage took over and brought them over. This kind of thing was done in front of the eyes of the southern Ming army. General Yu Guang, who was in charge of guarding the city, gritted his teeth. As early as last night, Yang Qindong sent people into the city to inform Kuang Yi that the king of Min sent people to talk to him. He also agreed and hoped that they would make things convenient. Chapter 452. When the letter was placed in front of him, Kuang Yi knew that he couldn't refuse. Not to mention that for the stability of the southern Ming Empire, they couldn't afford to offend the powerful mercenaries. Just a few days ago, Hu Yan and Madame Shui almost died in the city. They were responsible. They didn't pursue the matter because they knew that it had nothing to do with them. However, if he didn't agree to the envoy sent by Min King to meet with Yang Qindong, then the other party could bring up this matter at any time. At that time they could casually accuse them of colluding with the assassins. This would make it difficult for them to defend themselves. Face was given to each other. Fortunately, Kuang Yi knew that Yang Qindong still had the Yang family manor in Baiming. The southern Ming Empire had Jianing and brother Yang Si. He couldn't betray the great Ming Empire and didn't dare to do it. Therefore he made the decision and agreed to the request. Kuang Yi agreed. This was also why Yu Guang didn't dare to act rashly when he saw all this happening right under his nose. The mercenaries were only a squad of soldiers. They brought Qin Tian and his hundreds of subordinates through the city. To be honest, Qin Tian was a little nervous at this moment. Originally, he thought that the mercenaries would send at least a few hundred people or even a few thousand people to escort him. However, there were only 10 people and they had to walk through the city controlled by the southern Ming army. This was no longer a matter of safety. It was a provocation. Would the southern Ming army really do something in anger? If that was the case, wouldn't his life be over? With this kind of nervousness, the group smoothly walked through the city of Gaozhou. When Qin Tian saw that the city had been left behind, he suddenly felt a burst of cold wind at the back of his head. At this moment he remembered that he hadn't walked out of the gates of hell. He had just stepped into this place. For example, if he didn't have an agreement with Yang Qindong this time, how would he return to the Miao family's camp from the mercenaries' camp? Without the mercenaries' escort, how could he guarantee his safety? Only at this moment did he feel fear. In the mercenary camp, Tiger's Mane, representing Yang Qindong, met Qin Tian first. He served him good food and wine, fulfilling his role as a host. Qin Tian didn't expect to see Yang Qindong the moment he arrived. Fortunately, he was prepared for this. After investigating Yang Qindong, he knew what kind of person Tiger's Mane was and the importance of his position. So while he was eating, he ordered his men to carry 2 big boxes of gold and place them in front of Tiger's Mane. One box was worth 1,000 taels of gold, so 2 boxes would be worth 2,000 taels of gold. According to the exchange rate of 1 to 8, that would be 16,000 taels of silver. To an ordinary citizen, this amount of silver was more than enough to eat and drink for a lifetime. And this was just Qin Tian's greeting gift. He had already explained to Tiger's Mane that as long as he could meet the Duke of Loyalty, there would be more than 10 times the amount in front of him. The first gift was more than 100,000 taels of silver, and it wasn't even given to the main person. From this, it seemed that Qin Tian was very sincere. Tiger's Mane also stared greedily at the silver in front of him. I can try to see if you can meet my duke. But do you know that Yingzhong has already promised to give Songjiang prefectures and used shipyard to my duke? In comparison, if it's just some gold and silver, I'm afraid it's not sincere enough. He wasn't afraid of making a request, but he was afraid of not saying anything. Qin Tian's eyes were filled with excitement. Of course, We won't just take out these things. In order to show our Min King's sincerity, there are already 500 carriages of steel being sent here. It should arrive in a few days. 500 carriages? Tiger's Mane pretended to be very surprised and then nodded. Well, then I'll try to help you put in a few good words. Tiger's Mane was only willing to help because of the silver. Thank you, General Tiger. If we can achieve our goal this time, Qin Tian will still have more rewards. Ah, you're too kind, Tiger's Mane said with a greedy face and poured a cup of wine directly into his stomach. And on the same night, Qin Tian was allowed to meet Yang Qindong. He met the extremely young but powerful Duke of Loyalty of the Ming Dynasty. Qin Tian greets the Duke of Loyalty. After meeting, Qin Tian's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. He cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. At this time, Yang Qindong was only 21 years old. However, after experiencing so much, he already had the demeanor of a superior person. If he was willing, he could reveal the aura of a superior person at any time. You are Qin Tian? Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the tent, stared at the person who came and sized him up. Then he said very casually, I heard from Tiger's Mane that you are very good at doing things. Even want to give me a gift? Is it because your King of Min is afraid of me? Unlike the calmness he showed when he was with Lung Feng at this moment, Yang Qindong showed a very arrogant side. Although Qin Tian looked submissive at this time, in fact he was quietly observing Yang Qindong. Before this, he had grasped a certain amount of data and even read a lot of intelligence. However, Qin Tian believed in everything he saw with his own eyes. Although the intelligence said that the Duke of Loyalty was courageous and talented, Qin Tian always thought that this person was still too young. Even if he was young, it was inevitable that he would lose his cool when something happened, especially when he had won repeatedly. It was inevitable that he would be arrogant. Now it seemed that it was true. Seeing that Yang Qindong had only glanced at him a few times before ignoring him with his nose in the air, not only did he not feel humiliated, on the contrary, he was very happy. It was good to have a weakness. As long as he could grasp it, it would be easy to deal with him. Yes, our King of Min really wants to be friends with you. You saved Emperor Ingzong without fear of death on the battlefield. You forced Walla's army to retreat with your excellent means. You even completely destroyed Master Huang's army in Guangdong in a very short time. Our King of Min is full of praise for all of these. Everyone liked to hear good words, and Yang Qindong was the same. Hearing Qin Tian talking about his achievements with great familiarity, he laughed and said, Yes, these are all my achievements. Prince of Min is also a sensible person. If so, why didn't he retreat and surrender immediately after knowing my power? Don't tell me that you want me to lead an army to crush you and repeat Huang Yuliang's old path? When speaking of these, Yang Qindong deliberately stared at him as if he was going to scare him. Yes, Duke of Loyalty is very right. People had to bow under the eaves. As an excellent lobbyist, he knew when to show his weak side and when to show his strong side. With a submissive expression, Yang Qindong's expression became much better. Seeing that the sixth young master's temper was not so bad, Qin Tian hurriedly said what he wanted to say. Our King of Min really wants to be friends with you, Duke of Loyalty. He also knows that we will definitely lose if we fight with you. But when he heard the first part, Yang Qindong was still smiling. But when he heard the last part, his face changed. But what? But I dare not say what I want to say next. I am afraid that I will make you angry. Qin Tian looked up and showed an aggrieved expression. Just say what you want to say. I won't blame you. Say it quickly. Yang Qindong looked like he was fooled. Qin Tian knew that the opportunity had come. He straightened his body and said, But if our King of Min stops now with Ingzong's personality, he will definitely settle the score. At that time it will be difficult to keep your life. Qin Tian was not surprised. So what? When the time comes, this duke will just greet his majesty. Yang Qindong said confidently. When Qin Tian heard this, he despised Yang Qindong very much. He thought, You are just a duke. How can you boast like this? But what he didn't know was that this was what Yang Qindong wanted to show him. Thank you for your kindness, Duke of Loyalty. Although Qin Tian didn't agree with what Yang Qindong said, he still looked very grateful. When he saw the smile on the sixth young master's face, he mustered up his courage and said, But I am afraid that Duke of Loyalty can't protect King of Min at that time. As far as I know, Emperor Ingzong seems to be on guard against Duke of Loyalty. Otherwise, the matter of conferring a prince with a different surname would not be delayed. He stopped here. When he said this, Qin Tian immediately stopped talking and carefully observed Yang Chendong's performance. He said it just now. If there was anything he wanted to say, he could say it casually. Now he shouldn't be blamed. Sure enough, Yang Chendong's face was flushed red and he was obviously very angry. He even pointed his finger at Qin Tian, who was standing below, but in the end he didn't say a word of reproach. Brother Qin, what am I doing? Don't you know that this matter is the thing that annoys my duke the most? Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side, said. He seemed to be reprimanding Qin Tian for being insensible, but in fact he was also reminding him. Qin Tian showed a grateful smile to Tiger's Mane. Then his gaze fell on the angry Yang Chendong and said, Duke of Loyalty, Emperor Zong is really infuriating. But thinking about it carefully, isn't it because you are too young and your qualifications are too shallow? If you can do something earth-shattering for the world to see, I think that when the time comes, even the stingy Emperor Zong can't refuse to be conferred a prince. Chapter 453. What do you mean? Speak more clearly. Yang Chendong, who was originally very angry, suddenly straightened his body and stared at Qin Tian with his tiger-like eyes. Since Yang Chendong placed so much importance on these words, Qin Tian was delighted that the other had fallen into his trap. He cupped his hands and said, I am not talented, but I have an ingenious plan. As long as you can be the Duke of Loyal and Courageous, it will be easy for you to be bestowed the title of king of a different surname. He spoke with such confidence that Yang Chendong's interest was piqued. What is it? Defeat the Jiaoji soldiers and show the strength of the Duke of Loyalty. With a determined face, Qin Tian, who was almost gritting his teeth, finally said what was in his heart. Exhaling a long breath in his heart, Yang Chendong said in his heart, as expected, the other party really came for this. Although he was relieved, Yang Chendong pretended to be very shocked. Defeat the Jiaoji soldiers? This is not possible. Why can't I? Qin Tian asked in a pressing manner. Jiaoji is so powerful, how can it be so easy to defeat them? Moreover, aren't they the allies of the King of Min? Since we are friends, shouldn't your allies be my friends as well? This is not good. Yang Chendong shook his head lightly and looked like he was talking to himself. When Qin Tian saw this, he felt a sense of disdain in his heart. Just now he said that he was wise and powerful, and that he would destroy the King of Min's army and ask him to surrender. But when it came to the actual use of weapons, he could not do this and was afraid of that. He really did not understand how such a person could have achieved all those achievements in the past. Qin Tian really despised him in his heart, but he still tried to persuade him. Duke of Loyalty, although Jiaoji is our ally, they are still of a foreign race. As the saying goes, those who are not of our race will have different opinions. The attitude of Rongdi is not the same as that of Hua. No matter what, the King of Min is the king of the Great Ming. He has the pure bloodline of the ancestor. How can he tolerate a foreign race doing whatever they want in the Great Ming? Previously we had no choice but to form an alliance. But in fact we were wary of each other. In the end we were just using each other's relationship. There is no affection. Qin Tian said this righteously and continued, unlike our King of Min, who really appreciates Duke Zhongdan. Moreover, we are all Han people, so we should get closer to each other. Not to mention, this can help the Duke of Loyalty achieve great things and become the king of a foreign race. This kind of helping others is what the King of Min likes the most. What Qin Tian said was magnanimous, and he also pretended to be good for Yang Chendong. But in fact this was not the case at all. The people of the Security Bureau had already sent back the news that the King of Jiaoji had taken a fancy to the King of Min's sister, Zhou Xian, who was also Princess Yongxing, and wanted to marry her. Because of this, the King of Min was furious and said that his sister was willing to marry a foreign race's little king. This was almost the same meaning as when the kingdom of Dongwu wanted to marry Guan Yu's daughter and was rebutted. Although this time the King of Min took advantage of the power of Jiaoji to rise up. But in the end the King of Min still looked down on the small country of Jiaoji. They were just a small province of the Great Ming before and did not have any cultural inheritance. How could such a person be qualified to marry his sister? Not to mention that there was such a big gap in age. Princess Yongxing was the king of Annan Lily when he was 18 years old. In history he did not live until 1451, but because of his representative, the Longzi borrowed this person's name to let him live longer. The spectators have a strong historical knowledge, so don't doubt the Longzi on this issue. Thank you very much. He was already more than 60 years old. This was clearly pushing his sister into the fire pit. As the elder brother, and now with such great power, if he could not even protect his own sister, what would others say about him? Just based on this point, the relationship between the king of Min Zhu Huixing and the Jiaoji army started to drift apart. In addition, along the way the Jiaoji army burned, killed and looted everywhere they passed. They were very overboard and caused the people's lives to be in chaos. The king of Min had already made up his mind to deal with them. It was precisely because of these things that Qin Tian came here to fan the flames and wanted to use someone else to do his dirty work. In their eyes, as long as the two sides could fight, regardless of whether Yang Chendong won in the end or the Jiaoji army won in the end, it would be beneficial to them. Since that was the case, why should they be polite? Qin Tian had his own plans, but he did not know that the handsome young man Yao Yingjun, who was on good terms with Princess Yongxing Zhu Lian, was an important spy that the Security Bureau had placed in the other side. The information regarding this had already been sent back, and Yang Chendong was well aware of it. This was the importance of information. If he knew everything in advance, he would have more time to deal with it and he would be able to find the best way to solve the problem. What Qin Tian said was extremely righteous. From the perspective of the nation and country, even if Yang Chendong knew the truth, he would not correct it. Wasn't all of this what he wanted to do? Since he could not do anything to the Han people, then it should not be a problem to deal with the foreign races, especially Jiaoji, the predecessor of the modern Vietnam. They had betrayed the country several times and angered the brave People's Liberation Army, causing them to kill their way into their territory. The most hateful thing was that the other party's military warehouse was filled with all sorts of goods that were made in China. That kind of feeling must have been very chilling. In order to prevent such things from happening in the future, Yang Chendong made up his mind to deal with them a few hundred years in advance, so that those disgusting things would never happen again and would disappear forever. With this in mind, Yang Chendong did not expose some of Qin Tian's lies. Instead, he went along with Qin Tian's words and asked, "Against Jiaoji, will you support me?" This. Qin Tian's face changed from his heroic speech to a trace of awkwardness. This means that we cannot support you in terms of military strength. After all, everyone knows that they are our Min King's allies. Don't worry, Duke of Loyalty. Although we won't send troops, we will support you in other aspects, such as provisions and information. As long as you don't send troops, we, King of Min, will fully support you if you need anything else. As if he was afraid that Yang Chendong would have some misgivings, Qin Tian patted his chest and promised. Is that so? Yang Chendong did not answer immediately. Instead, he fell into deep thought as if he was thinking carefully. Yang Chendong's lack of response caused Qin Tian to lose his confidence. He was afraid that Yang Chendong would reject him, so he quickly signaled to Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side and receiving benefits from him, with his eyes. Tiger's Mane hesitated at first but soon made a decision. He looked at Yang Chendong and said, "Duke, Jiaoji has gone too far. Didn't they try to assassinate you 2 days ago? If we don't teach them a lesson, won't we be looked down upon and become a joke to the world?" Yes. Qin Tian slapped his head. How could he have forgotten about this? He quickly said, "Jiaoji sent people to assassinate me. This is really shameful and hateful. Just based on this point alone, we have to teach them a lesson. This is the only way to show the dominance of the loyal and courageous duke." That's true. Yang Chendong slowly raised his head and agreed. However, he soon shook his head. "No, if we were to fight with the Jiaoji soldiers and the Min King suddenly attacked us from behind, we won't be able to withstand a pincer attack." When he heard Yang Chendong's concerns, Qin Tian immediately replied, "That is impossible. Our Min King is a man of his words. He would never do something so treacherous. Jiaoji is your ally." Yang Chendong ignored Qin Tian's solemn vow. He only said one sentence and the other party was instantly silenced. But what does the loyal duke want us to do for you to be completely assured?" Qin Tian did not know how to convince Yang Chendong. Even though they had decided not to fight with the mercenaries in the short term, there were some things that others would not believe even if he said it. "Show me your sincerity. Let's ask the Min King to write a declaration of war and spread it throughout the world, stating that he and Jiaoji have completely broken up. This way I will believe your sincerity and will send troops. How about that? In addition, you have just occupied Yunnan, Guangxi and Guangdong provinces. I believe you have a lot of captives in your hands. Coincidentally, the leader of the mercenaries, the big brother that I saved, is in need of people. You should also show some sincerity and make my big brother happy. Not a lot, just 100,000 people. Men, women, old and young are acceptable. Yang Qindong proposed the plan that he had decided on long ago. Yang Qindong, who understood the situation of the Min king, naturally knew that the other party did not like the Jiaoji army and would not make a move on him in the short term. However, there was always a possibility. Before the situation changed, who knew what would happen in the future? Most importantly, if he wanted to do this, he would need the support of Nanming. This declaration of war became very important. This was also the reason why he could convince Minister Kuangye to not make an enemy out of the Min king and the Miao army and focus on dealing with Jiaoji. Without this declaration of war, how would others believe him if he just said it himself? At least, it would be easier for him to ask for 100,000 people. He had just occupied 3 provinces. Others might not have it, but he had a lot of people in his territory. Moreover, he did not only want young people. In this way, he could also help the other party solve the problem of having too many people but not enough food. Yang Qindong proposed his own request. This time it was Qin Tian's turn to consider. 100,000 people was indeed a problem. He could just give more to the older children and less to the young men. He could make the decision on this issue. If he wanted to make a declaration, it would not be a big deal. However, would people say that the Min king was burning the bridge after crossing the river? After all, they were able to rise so quickly because of the Jiaoji army's help in the beginning. Chapter 454. While Qin Tian was still considering the gains and losses, Yang Qindong spoke again. Jiaoji is a foreign tribe after all. If Prince of Min really wants to achieve something in the future, it would be best for you to draw a clear line with them. They were not like the Miao people. They had been living on this land for generations and were used to being in each other's company. Jiaoji people were very independent. If they were to become successful one day, it would be enough for His Highness Prince of Min to be very busy. Of course, you can go back and discuss this with Prince of Min. We are not in a hurry. Yang Qindong was indeed not in a hurry. Regardless of whether it was the steel that Zhu Xian wanted to give him or the steel that Prince of Min gave him, they had not arrived yet. With the mindset that having the steel in his hands was the way of the king, he would not do anything as long as these benefits were not in his hands. Even though he was already mentally prepared to fight Jiaoji, he still had to take things one step at a time. Qin Tian thought that there were some things that he could not decide, so he raised his head and said seriously, "Then I will report it to His Highness King Min. I think it will not take long for Duke Zhongdan to give a satisfactory answer. But please rest assured that regardless of whether this matter is successful or not, we have no intention of becoming enemies with Duke of Loyalty and the mercenaries." Yang Qindong nodded satisfactorily at the other party's goodwill. Good. As long as Prince of Min's army and the Miao army do not make things difficult for us, we will not take the initiative to cause trouble. You can rest assured about this. This was considered an agreement that both parties agreed upon. Based on this agreement, Qin Tian did not come here in vain. Thinking that Prince of Min still had to make a decision on the declaration of war, and thinking that Jiaoji was pressuring him step by step, he decided to take his leave. Following this, Lung Feng naturally sent them out of the camp. Unlike when he came, the hundreds of chests of gold and silver that Qin Tian brought were all placed in the mercenaries' camp. This was originally a show of sincerity. Since the negotiations went smoothly, there was no mention of taking back the chests. Not long after Qin Tian left, Tiger's Mane represented him on a trip to Gaozhou's prefectural city. He followed the young master's instructions and explained the key points of this negotiation to the other party. Kuang Yi was waiting for news in the government office. Since Yang Qindong sent someone to inform him that there would be an envoy from King of Min, Kuang Yi could not sit still. Yang Qindong and his mercenaries were so powerful that he was shocked more than once. The current southern Ming Empire was already riddled with holes. They were already facing huge difficulties. If the mercenaries switched sides at this time, the southern Ming Empire would really be in danger. It was precisely because he knew the severity of the matter that he didn't have a single moment of rest in the 2 days since Qin Tian had passed through the city and arrived at the mercenary camp. Because of this matter, Guan Ying, Ma Wei, and the others repeatedly tried to persuade him. For example, they said that Yang Qindong's fourth brother was still in Jianing. If the Duke of Loyal Courage dared to make a move, they could use his fourth brother to threaten him. Some people even suggested that when Qin Tian passed through the city, they could kill the envoy directly. By then, it would be more difficult for the Duke of Loyal Courage to ally with King of Min. In the face of these schemes, by the time they reached Kuang Yi, they were all rejected by him. Now Yang Qindong had not made a final decision. If they pushed him so hard, it would be easy for him to be pushed to the side of the opponent. So, they would really be sinners for all eternity. Kuang Yi, who was already very old, would not agree to such a risky thing. Not to mention, based on his understanding of Yang Qindong, this person was very considerate of the overall situation. Otherwise, he would not send troops to Guangdong to quell the rebellion of the Yellow Bandits without receiving any benefits. It was only because the Emperor Zhou Xian did not believe in all kinds of things that led to the current situation that was not very good. Thinking of the Emperor Zhou Xian, Kuang Yi also felt a headache. Since ancient times, the imperial power was the greatest. This was indisputable. But there was a premise for everything, that was, the imperial power was consolidated. When the power was strong, it was really the greatest. On the contrary, if you were not strong enough and still wanted others to obey you, then the emperor was not sensible. Not all the generals in the world were like Yu Fei, who could be called back with 12 gold medals. Who was Yang Qindong? If one looked carefully, he had been wandering outside the imperial power. In fact, with the powerful mercenaries as his backing, he also had such strength. In the face of such a strong soldier, the most important thing to do was to find a way to make friends with him and play the emotional card, instead of oppressing him with power and finally making a loss. Of course, although Kuang Yi was also an important minister, he could not represent the emperor in many things. Some things he just thought in his heart. If he really wanted to say that he really wanted to blame Zhou Xian, he did not have the power to do so, let alone the ability to bear the consequences. While Kuang Yi's thoughts were still in torment, Tiger's Mane came. This was Yang Qindong's closest person. Many times his appearance could represent his master. In the main hall, Kuang Yi saw Tiger's Mane. Although he did not personally come out to greet him, his waiting figure in front of the hall was enough to give Tiger's Mane face. Who was Tiger's Mane? In these years, after being trained by Yang Qindong, he was no longer the little follower of the past. This meant that he was reluctant to leave Yang Qindong. Otherwise, if he was casually sent back to Tsushin City, he would be in existence on the same level as Lung Song and Gao Xiong. It was not impossible for him to be higher than them. Seeing that Kuang Yi was waiting outside the hall, this kind of treatment made him feel flattered. He hurriedly took a few steps forward, clasped his fist and bowed. This little Tiger's Mane greets the minister. Kuang Yi politely extended his hand and helped Tiger's Mane up. Brother Tiger, there is no need to be so polite. Come, please sit in the hall. Servants, come and serve tea. Kuang Yi's face was full of enthusiasm. Tiger's Mane was also very respectful on the surface, but in his heart he admired the young master even more. If it was not for the young master's strength, how could he be treated with such courtesy? One must know that this was the Minister of War and also the Crown Prince's tutor. How could an ordinary person like him come into contact with him, let alone be treated with such courtesy? Tiger's Mane's thinking was correct. The Ming dynasty's hierarchy was very strict. An official was an official and a citizen was a citizen. This was not something that could be confused at any time. Even if this official's position wasn't high and the other party was a rich gentleman, the official still had to be stronger in a real conversation. This was because he didn't just represent himself, he had the support of the entire team of scholars behind him. Not to mention a high official like Kuang Yi. Other than the emperor, there were very few people who could give him any face. But it was this kind of person with such a high position that was able to come out of the hall to greet him. If it were any other citizen, they would have already knelt on the ground, with tears flowing down their faces as if they were willing to die for their friend. Exaggeratedly, even if they were immediately asked to die, there would probably be people who would agree. But all of this was completely different when it came to Tiger's Mane. Following the young master and especially seeing the development of Crimson City, his vision had long been different from ordinary people. In his heart, even the emperors of the Southern Ming Dynasty and Northern Ming Dynasty could not be compared to his young master, let alone a minister of war. Moreover, a minister of war who was weak and defeated. With this confidence, when Tiger's Mane spoke to Kuang Yi, he maintained enough autonomy, neither servile nor overbearing, and did not have the slightest intention of lowering his head. Kuang Yi listened carefully to Tiger's Mane's report. When he first heard that there were 100,000 people, he did not seem to understand. After all, why would the mercenary army need so many Han people? But then when he heard that Yang Qindong asked the king of Min to make a public declaration of war against the Jiaoji army, his attention was completely diverted. He suddenly stood up from his chair. Did the king of Min agree? Not yet. Tiger's Mane acted as if he did not see Kuang Ye's excitement. He shook his head and said, "The messenger Qin Tian said that he would go back and discuss with the king of Min. But my young master also said that there would be no problem." Yang Qindong said that there would be no problem, so Kuang Yi was much more confident. It had been proven that on such a major issue, the Duke of Loyalty would not speak without thinking. And if this was the case, it would be great. Without the support of the Jiaoji army, the strength of the king of Min's faction would naturally be greatly reduced. At least in the short term, they would not have the strength to continue north. This would give southern Ming more time to breathe. Once they made good use of it, the recruited recruits would be trained, and it would be equivalent to having another powerful army. At that time, they would go all out to the south and solve the problem of the king of Min. Thinking that southern Ming finally saw the dawn of revival, Kuang Ye's spirit became much better. When he looked at Tiger's Mane, his tone became more determined. "Then I will have to trouble Brother Tiger to convey to the Duke of Loyalty that we thank him for everything he has done for southern Ming. If this matter is successful, it will be a great merit. I will report it to the emperor." Tiger's Mane felt that Kuang Ye's words were sincere. He cupped his fist and said, "I thank Minister for your kind words on behalf of my young master. Oh yes, my young master also said that once the king of Min really makes a public declaration of war, Minister, please give up on Gaozhou Prefecture for your own safety. Southern Ming should also take this opportunity to recuperate. Once the training of the new army is completed, then it will be time to go south and solve the problem of the king of Min. Before that, it is better not to act rashly. Otherwise, the situation will become very troublesome." Hu Mang's words were a little decisive and even a little unpleasant to hear. The gist of it was that without the mercenaries here, Kuang Yi and his 1,000 men would not be able to defend Gaozhou Prefecture no matter what. At first glance, it did seem like he was looking down on them, but wasn't this the reality? Chapter 455. Not to mention the huge difference in military strength between the two sides, Gaozhou Prefecture was already an isolated city. Around him, except for the road back home in the northeast, the other directions were all occupied by the king of Min and the Miao people. In such a situation, even if they did not attack the city, they could surround Kuang Yi to death. The situation was like this. It was not because Tiger's Mane's words were unpleasant. Kuang Yi, who knew this, was not angry. Instead, he clasped his fist and thanked him. "I am grateful that Duke Zhongdan is still thinking for me. Brother Tiger, please go back and tell Duke Zhongdan that I am not an inflexible person. I will give up Gaozhou Prefecture and return to Nanjing to train the new army." Kuang Yi was so honest and admitted his shortcomings and weaknesses. This made Tiger's Mane think highly of him. "Okay, I will pass on your words to my young master. I will take my leave now." While Tiger's Mane and Kuang Yi were talking, Yang Qindong called the two regiment commanders to discuss in the tent. "Regiment Commander Liu, I have equipped all your auxiliary soldiers with Type 81 rifles. How are you guys getting used to it?" After returning a simple and efficient military salute, Yang Qindong asked the auxiliary regiment commander Liu Zhua. The last time he fought with Miao Bing using cold weapons against cold weapons, the result was naturally a great victory. However, his side's losses were not small, at least in Yang Qindong's eyes. In order to preserve his sufficient strength and also to display his sufficient advantages, he decided to equip all the auxiliary soldiers on the battlefield with the 81 automatic rifle, which was commonly known as the 81 automatic rifle. The reason why they were not equipped with a better 95 style was because they wanted to differentiate the cold edge from the auxiliary weapons. Secondly, and more importantly, with the current strength of Crimson Nest City's arsenal, they were still unable to create the 95 style. Even for the Type 81 rifles, Yang Qindong first took out a large number of finished products for them to understand and disassemble. In addition, they already had the successful experience of their predecessors. A lot of information was found in the warehouse. It was because of all these advantages that the Type 81 assault rifle could be used. It had to be said that there was no lack of smart people everywhere, especially the craftsmen of the Great Ming Dynasty. In terms of intelligence, they were no worse than the craftsmen of any other period. It was only because they didn't have enough development environment that they naturally went from being brilliant to being ordinary. During the Ming Dynasty, craftsmen had very little social status and their income was extremely low. It was already considered good if they could fill their stomachs. Even so, there were still some people who wanted to invent something that was very practical and push the development of social science forward. Unfortunately, the person who made such a contribution did not receive a reward that was proportional to his efforts. There were even some people who gathered the materials for their own experiments. Once they succeeded, the fruits would belong to the Ministry of Works and the Emperor. The only thing they would get was the title of a good craftsman, which couldn't be eaten or exchanged for money. Under such a system without any incentives, it was easy to imagine that even the best craftsman would soon become a commoner. However, the same people in Yang Qindong's hands were completely different. The armament factory in Crimson City implemented a guaranteed incentive system. The guaranteed salary referred to how much money you would receive after completing the work at hand. The incentive system referred to how much you would receive after completing the task or making other contributions. In fact, the craftsmen of this dynasty did not lack strength and brains. Once there was space for them to display their abilities, everyone would hold their breaths and fiercely exert their strength. Because of this, many outstanding people appeared. Not only did they receive honors such as medals of various levels in their hands, they also received large amounts of gold and silver. This reward system that not only gave them fame but also money made all the craftsmen burn with passion. Under such a big environment, naturally they would get twice the result with half the effort. Just like the armament factory, the quality of steel determined how many guns and cannons could be produced. In the process of tempering steel with the help of the books provided by Yang Qindong, they could make the steel more solid instead of being so brittle. They could also increase the density of the steel so that there would not be many small bubbles in the performance which would be easy to explode. Regarding this basic knowledge, there were clear records in the books. As long as one diligently studied, they would discover that many of the principles were not that difficult to understand. It was just that they lacked imagination. Once he did it, he would realize that things were so simple when he looked back. The armament factory began to expand and improve. Batch after batch of Type 81 rifles were brought out and sent to the temporary port of Laizhou Prefecture a few days ago. At this point, all the auxiliary soldiers had changed their equipment. Speaking of which, facing Yang Qindong's inquiry, the auxiliary commander Lu Zhou had an excited expression. "Sixth young master, don't worry. Most of these people have practiced guns before. After a short period of adjustment, they will be able to regain that feeling. Once on the battlefield, they will definitely be able to display their strengths." It was no wonder that Lu Zhou was so excited. In the past, he had only seen the Cold Vanguard use advanced firearms to slaughter enemies. Although they were also equipped with the new type of bows and crossbows, the effective range was still too short. The advantage wasn't very obvious. Because of this matter, the battalion commanders and company commanders below him had looked for him more than once. They had asked him when they would be able to be like the Cold Vanguard and use advanced firearms to kill enemies in battle. In the past, when faced with this question, Lu Zhou would remain silent because he didn't know when this day would come. But now the Type 81 rifles were given out. Although they were still lacking in functionality compared to the Type 95, especially since they were handmade, there were still some differences between the same gun. It still required the soldiers to familiarize themselves with each gun. However, compared to the cold weapons in the enemy's hands, these rifles were already many times stronger. Once they used these Type 81 rifles on the battlefield in the next war, it was easy to imagine what the outcome would be. Just thinking about it made him excited. Lu Zhou was still standing there with a face full of excitement. Yang Qindong's gaze had already landed on the commander of the Cold Vanguard 2nd Regiment, Luo Pa. The brothers of the Cold Vanguard will have to work hard for a while. Teach the auxiliary soldiers how to use guns and how to maintain them. And you guys, you must pay close attention to the safekeeping and use of guns. Absolutely do not allow any guns to be lost. Even more so, do not allow anything bad to happen. Once someone shows signs of doing something bad, immediately kick them out of the team. Do not show any mercy. His gaze once again landed on Kong Jia and Song Jia, the two regiment political commissars. Yang Qindong's tone was a little strict. Guns were not like other things. Once in the hands of the enemy, they could create chaos or even assassinate people. They could take people's lives in the blink of an eye. In the face of such an advanced double-edged sword, one had to be vigilant. This was also why only the auxiliary soldiers were issued Type 81 rifles. The temporary auxiliary soldiers who had not been through much training still used cold weapons. Sixth young master, don't worry. Normally when there is no mission, each person will only fire 5 bullets. Also, there will be a check in the morning and evening. Soldiers have the right to supervise each other. As long as there is no platoon or squad covering for each other, nothing will happen. The two regiment political commissars said with a solemn expression. Clearly, they had also realized the benefits and corresponding dangers that advanced guns could bring to them. Thus they had long prepared for it. That's the best. You have to talk to the soldiers in a timely manner. Make full use of your advantage in thinking. Once there are any bad signs or problems with the soldiers, you have to immediately enlighten and solve them. Today's matter can't be left to tomorrow. Yang Qindong nodded and said again in a strict tone. After discussing the issue of guns, his gaze landed on the 4 officers and said, "Make use of the time to rest and reorganize. It won't be long before we move out. At that time, I'm afraid that it will be impossible for everyone to rest as much as you do now. So now is the time to mobilize before the war." When they heard the words "mobilize before the war," the 2 regimental commanders and the 2 political commissars couldn't help but tremble. Compared to the Ming army, who was afraid of war, they had been waiting for this day because only war could quickly expand their strength. Only war could show their ability. Yes. The 4 of them gave a very standard military salute in unison. At this moment, every one of their breaths became a little hurried. Crimson City. Compared to 2 years ago when Yang Qindong left this place, it could be said that it was completely different. Spacious and clean cement roads, neat and orderly buildings of various types, self-contained and well-equipped new residential areas, all kinds of factories and units, one after another. Looking from afar, who knew how many tall chimneys were emitting black smoke? This was far from the time to care about environmental issues. At this moment, the world had yet to experience the industrial era. It was originally very well protected, and Crimson City was the first industrial city. Every day, many of the things manufactured here would be transported by the Navy of the Cold Front to the nearby areas. For example, items as small as toilet paper, toothpaste, toothbrushes, chewing gum, soap, towels, nail clippers, sugar, canned food, and so on. As large as mirrors, glass, cosmetics, cheongsams, and so on, all of them were best-selling products. They were all in short supply and were sent to some nearby countries. These things were exchanged for countless gold and silver, rice, flour, cloth, and various ores and steel. With the raw materials on Ryukyu Island, as long as it was Xianxia's territory, everyone's life became better. They had enough food and clothing, and their homes were filled with all kinds of food and silver. In order to ensure that these fruits of victory were not stolen and plundered by others, everyone gave their all to push this carriage forward. Chapter 456. One of the branch factories of the main food factory, the instant noodle factory. The factory's director, Zhou Xian, was leading nearly 3,000 workers in the factory to make the newly developed instant noodle. This was the political task given by the 6th young master in a letter. Along with the detailed process of making instant noodle, there were also 2 boxes of finished products. Zhou Xian was the first person to fully understand the book and develop the first bowl of instant noodle. According to the reward system, after passing the political review and confirming that there were no problems with the person and family background, he became the first factory director of the instant noodle factory. Before, when he heard that the first person to develop instant noodle would be the factory director and become the leader of 3,000 people, Zhou Xian didn't believe it. But when he really did it and was entrusted with this important task at this moment, he was extremely excited. At the same time, his admiration for the 6th young master was like a torrential river. No one knew when it started, but there was a legend in Kaohsiung City. It was said that the 6th young master was a god sent by the gods to save the hard-working people and change the world. Otherwise, Why would the sixth young master always be able to come up with all kinds of new things that they had never heard of before or even dared to think about? The ancient people were originally very superstitious, and most of them didn't have any culture, so it was easy for them to be taken advantage of. In addition, Yang Qindong did indeed get a lot of good things that smart people couldn't think of, such as the various advanced guns and cannons guarding Ryukyu Island. With these facts, more and more people believed in this legend, so much so that the Xianxia higher-ups who first spread this rumor also agreed with it. Instant noodle was precisely based on this legend. Of course, this was also due to the big warehouse. When the bags of instant noodle were opened and soaked in hot water and eaten by everyone was full of praise and praise. The higher-ups immediately decided to rush the production of these things. Not only could they replace food to provide food for the people, but they would also be excellent military supplies if they were placed in the army. It would play a crucial role in solving the problem of food rations for the soldiers. With the help of some books that Yang Qindong found in the warehouse, the method of making instant noodles was listed in detail. Then came the more complicated manufacturing machine. Once the machines were available in batches, the production of finished instant noodles would be greatly accelerated. All of this work was left to the blacksmiths in the munitions factory. There was strength in numbers. After nearly half a year of various experiments, the first batch of machines finally left the factory. The moment they were distributed to the instant noodle factory, Zhou Dai and more than 3,000 employees were so excited that they shed tears. They knew that their opportunity to perform had come. He took out the wheat oil and other materials that he had prepared beforehand. With the help of the machine assembly line, the first batch of homemade instant noodles was finally ready. Due to all kinds of problems, the production of the first batch of instant noodles was full of twists and turns, and the machine had to be stopped from time to time. However, as long as the first step was taken, it was believed that it wouldn't be long before a more suitable second assembly line appeared, followed by a third, a fourth. In the end, instant noodles would be popularized and become an important part of the food factory. The latest news about the changes in Xi'an City would be sent to Yang Qindong every few days. Once they found that there was a deviation from the track, they would immediately correct it, and then the information would be quickly transmitted to Ryukyu Island. After 2 years of development, the Security Bureau was no longer what it used to be. Their tentacles had already involved various places and even many countries. Just the monthly budget alone had expanded to more than 3 million taels. With so much money spent, even if such a huge organization was handed over to the Southern Ming or Baiming to manage, they would not be able to afford it financially. This was also the important reason why the Security Bureau had actually surpassed the Imperial Secret Guards and the East Faction Guards in many aspects. Of course, 3 million taels a month seemed to be a lot, but when one knew that the total number of internal and external personnel of the Security Bureau had reached 50,000, it was not so surprising. In other words, if it was implemented on each person, it would only be tens of thousands of taels of silver a month. It must be known that in order to find out useful information, these people would definitely spend a lot of money. Often it was just a small piece of inadvertent information. If one wanted to be the first to get it, one would have to spend a lot of money and time in the early stages. In this regard, Yang Qindong had no intention of reducing the amount at all. In his eyes, the Security Bureau had not developed enough. His goal was the whole world, and he had only just touched Asia and a small part of Europe. This result naturally could not satisfy him. It could also be imagined that one day when they really went out, the Security Bureau would definitely be the group of people who would always be at the forefront. When they went to a new country, a new environment, at that time the expenses would really be huge. Fortunately, with the emergence of various new factories in Xi'an City, there would be offshore ships sending out novel goods every day, and huge amounts of silver would be sent back to the island every day. This was where Yang Qindong dared to invest a lot of money. This was the advantage of a monopoly. When the things in Xi'an City became unique, when the goods they produced could not meet the demand, the power to set the price was completely in their hands. In Yang Qindong's words, it would be a waste to not earn money from foreigners. There was only a higher price, there was no limit. It was precisely because of such instructions, coupled with the existence of a group of powerful people in the upper echelons of each country, that such high-end products were constantly taken out and consumed, and there was no need to worry about not being able to sell them. Developed communication had its advantages, and being conservative also had its advantages. Just like now, because it was too difficult to communicate with other countries, Crimson City naturally rose up. It was developing in the same way every few days. At the same time, many of its disadvantages were revealed. Most importantly, its population was too small. Ryukyu Island's territory was still sufficient. At the very least, it had a population of less than 1 million, and this was after the recent kidnapping of quite a number of people and sending them to the island. Even so, compared to Taiwan's population of more than 20 million in the future, the current population was not even 1/20th of that. One could imagine just how vast this place was. Because of this, there was a large amount of land that needed people to develop and plant. Even though the first Shang dynasty in the north was still struggling at death's door and had not been completely destroyed, most of the land on the island was already under Xianxia's control. This caused the gap in their population to be a little too large. During this period of time, in the process of dealing with the Huang bandits, many of the Ming dynasty civilians and captives had been moved over. However, there were only a few 100,000 people. Compared to the lack of manpower, there was still a huge gap. The Ming dynasty was still at its peak, and at the very least the citizens were not completely disappointed in them. Under such circumstances, it was obviously unrealistic to ask them to leave their homes and move to the island. Under the current situation, he could not force others to do so. Otherwise, once the southern Ming dynasty discovered his intentions, who knew what the consequences would be? After thinking about it, in order to solve the population problem on Little Ryukyu Island, Yang Qindong set his sights on the foreign races. Those who are not of my race are bound to have different intentions. This sentence had been proven to be correct in history. However, if he was only using them, then it was nothing. If they were obedient and accepted the Han culture, then they would not be hopeless. On the other hand, if they did not want to give face, then Yang Qindong did not mind creating more slaves. Some dirty and tiring jobs could be done. Wouldn't that be perfect? With such thoughts in mind, Yang Qindong's first target naturally fell on the Jiaoji country. Once the Han people were strong, they would tuck their tails between their legs and behave themselves. Once the Han people became weak, they would be like poisonous snakes in the dark coming up to bite them. It was truly annoying. Yang Qindong's plan for dealing with the foreign races was to directly attack, cripple them. After destroying the country, they would be thrown into chaos again. This seemed a bit cruel, and there was nothing humane about it. However, in the long run, how could this not be a solution? Pain could be exchanged for long-term stability. No matter how one looked at it, it was worth it. As for why others did not do this, perhaps it was because they did not have the ability to do so. Or perhaps it was because too much time had passed and there were too many unforeseen variables. However, all of this was nothing in Yang Qindong's eyes. He had Duchong and everything was enough. Kuang Ye's secret memorial had been sent to Zhu Xian of Ying's sect. Zhu Xian naturally praised the compromise that Jiaoji sent out assassins. Yang Qindong's wife was attacked, and then the Duke of Loyalty and King of Min reached an agreement to send troops to deal with the Jiaoji army. No matter what, Zhu Xian was the monarch of the Ming dynasty. In his view, the war with King of Min was just a family matter. Even if the Miao people participated, it was not a big deal. After all, the Miao people and the Han people had been together for many years, and they were also a part of the Ming dynasty. However, what was Jiaoji? What was the meaning of participating in this? He had always been dissatisfied in his heart, but there was no other way. Now Yang Qindong took the initiative to stand up and deal with them, and he only sent out the unusable ships and some iron in Sujiang Manor. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. After all, if Yang Qindong did not take action, who knew if Songjiang could be defended in the future? The things placed there were likely to become the spoils of war for King of Min, who would not be willing to take these things that might not belong to them and use them to do favors and attack the opponent. Chapter 457. As for whether Yang Qindong would fight with the Jiaoji soldiers after obtaining the item, Zhu Xian wasn't worried at all. Not to mention that Jiaoji's actions would attract Yang Qindong's anger. Just based on what Kuang Yi said in the secret report, would the King of Min issue a declaration of war against Jiaoji? Based on this, it was enough to make people feel relieved. Even though Zhu Xian would never admit the King of Min's status as an independent king, he would not admit that the declaration of war was legitimate. However, if the contents of the declaration of war were beneficial to him, then it was a different matter. He would just turn a blind eye to it. Since Zhu Xian agreed, the following matters naturally went smoothly. After the decree was issued, the southern Ming soldiers in Songjiang Prefecture began to get busy. After the decree was issued, Zhou Xian seemed very satisfied. Once the Jiaoji army didn't participate, the king of Min would lose an arm. The difference in military strength between the two sides would become smaller and smaller. Once the king of Min had enough time to develop, it would not take long for the chaos in the south to be quelled. At that time, it would be time for him to consider the matter of the northern expedition. However, before this there was also one thing that made Zhou Xian unhappy. That was Yang Qindong's physical condition suddenly improved. Zhou Xian no longer dared to underestimate Yang Qindong since the incident with Tu Mu. Facts had proven that his caution was correct. At the very least, everything Yang Qindong had done up until now had caused others to have a whole new level of respect for him. It was even to the extent that they had no choice but to be wary of him. Just like how Zhou Xian was tired of the Jiaoji army, he was also very disgusted with Yang Qindong and the mercenaries that he could control. Zhou Xian didn't know what would happen if the mercenaries fought with the Jiaoji army. He also didn't want to make too many predictions because in his heart, no matter who won in the end, the remaining one might become his enemy. He had to think about how to get rid of the winning side before it was strong enough. For this matter, he called over the chief eunuch Chao Jixiang and the commander of the embroidered uniform guard Meng Da. These two were his absolute confidants. Furthermore, their authority was given to them by him, so there was no need to worry that they would betray him. To put it bluntly, the two of them were nothing if they left him. When the two trusted aides were called in front of Zhou Xian, their hearts began to beat like drums. They wondered who the emperor was going to deal with this time. Who was he going to play tricks on? They couldn't be blamed for having such thoughts. To be called to the emperor at the same time, of course, it wasn't as simple as just calling you over for a chat. Since they were on the same side, Zhou Xian naturally spoke more straightforwardly. You all know that Yang Qindong has recovered, right? Upon hearing this, the two of them understood and nodded. Replying to your majesty, this subject already knows. It's good that you know. He's going to lead his troops to fight against Jiaoji. This is an opportunity for you. The emperor didn't make things clear. This was perhaps a habit of his. He would never make things clear. This way, no matter what happened, they would have a lot of room to maneuver. Chao Jixiang and Meng Da were both shrewd people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to reach their current positions. When they heard Zhou Xian's words, they understood what he meant. However, their expressions became unsightly because of this. It wasn't for any other reason. It was because it was too difficult to deal with, or rather, assassinate Yang Qindong. It wasn't as if the two of them hadn't tried before. They had even spent a lot of effort to arrange for people to get close to Yang Qindong. Disregarding everything else, just joining the mercenary army was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even though they had already sent out what they believed to be the best of the best and even made a lot of preparations for this. However, for some reason it didn't take long for these people to be found and then mysteriously disappear, never to be contacted again. It was fine if it happened once or twice, but when it happened every time, as long as one wasn't an idiot, one would understand what had happened. Something had happened to the people they sent out. Of course, they didn't know that with the support of powerful silver tails, the security bureau's methods were already not inferior to the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards. This was especially so when Zhou Xian went to Nanjing to establish the southern Ming dynasty. They had already started making arrangements. Even now, there were many people from the security bureau in the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards. However, because they hid too well and were generous, unless it involved some important information, they wouldn't act rashly. As a result, the security bureau didn't know the true identities of these people. Originally, they wanted to infiltrate the other party's internal department, but now they were the ones who had infiltrated. It was really a kind of irony. Moreover, after the incident with Su Munair, even if she wanted to use a honey trap, it would be difficult for it to work. Zhou Xian took in their expressions and wanted to angrily scold them for being useless. However, after considering that other than them, he didn't have anyone more powerful to use. He could only suppress the anger in his heart and say, "All right, I'm not asking you to do it right now. Once the war starts, who knows how long it will take. Perhaps Yang Qindong might lose to Jiaoji, but you have to make preparations in other aspects. If there's a chance, you mustn't let it go. Do you understand?" How could the two of them not understand when he said it so bluntly? They immediately knelt down and said, "Your Majesty, please don't worry. We'll definitely do our best to solve your Majesty's problems. It's not that you have to do your best but that there must be a good outcome. Seeing that the two of them spoke heartily but didn't have any intention of making any promises, Zhou Xian purposely put on a stern face, looking as if he wasn't satisfied with their answers. When it came to dealing with other officials, whether it was the embroidered uniform guards or the East faction guards, it was a piece of cake. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, it was still possible to find some things to pin on you. In fact, this was the method used. Who knew how many officials had been punished for no reason? Yang Chendong was completely different. He had an army in his hands, and it was an extremely elite army. Furthermore, he never visited the palace to meet the emperor. This made it impossible for them to find a chance to make a move. The so-called going all out just now was just empty words. Now that Zhou Xian had exposed them, the two of them couldn't help but blush. Fortunately, they were smart people, especially Zhou Xian. To be able to be placed in an important position by Zhou Xian and even treat him like Wang Zhen in the past, if it wasn't for his ability, he wouldn't have been able to reach such heights just by relying on his loyalty. Your Majesty, this subject has a suggestion, but I don't know if it's appropriate to say it. Zhou Xian knew that he had to bring out something useful today. Otherwise, the emperor wouldn't let him off easily. Sir, if you have something to say, just say it. I'm listening. Seeing that Zhou Xian had something to say, Zhou Xian immediately became interested. He wanted to see if Zhou Xian really had a good way to deal with Yang Chendong. Being stared at by the emperor, Zhou Xian first took a deep breath and quickly thought over his plan in his mind. After thinking that it was feasible, he said, Your Majesty, do you think the Prince of Min or the Duke of Zhongdan is a greater threat to the South Ming dynasty? Hearing Zhou Xian's question, Zhou Xian wanted to say that both were greater threats. However, considering that such an answer was too shameless, he thought for a while and said, Of course I think the Duke of Zhongdan is a greater threat. After all, the Prince of Min is a member of our Zhou family. We can talk about our affairs behind closed doors. Good. This was the answer that Zhou Xian wanted. Striking while the iron was hot, he said, Since this is the case, this subject thinks that we can contact the Prince of Min and deal with the Duke of Zhongdan together. If he loses the battle with Jiaozhi, there is nothing to say. If he wins, he is bound to come back. At that time, we will wait for them to fight until both sides are injured. When they are tired and exhausted, we will suddenly send troops. Your Majesty, what do you think the result will be? Hiss. Zhou Xian took a deep breath after hearing this. If an army had just finished a battle and was about to take a good rest, a stronger army would appear and target them, then the result would be obvious. If that was the case, then the overall situation would be set. The plan was good. Even Zhou Xian felt that it was too insidious. However, considering that everything was for the sake of the great Ming dynasty, it was understandable that the method was too extreme. But it was because of this that Zhou Xian had to cooperate with the Prince of Min, which made Zhou Xian a little unhappy. Seeing that Zhou Xian did not immediately express his opinion and was thinking deeply, Zhou Xian continued, Your Majesty, the Prince of Min and you are just family matters. Yang Chendong is really different. If we can't suppress him now, it will be more difficult to target him in the future. Once he gains power, who knows if he will be the next Huang Yuliang. His face was still very serious, but he could not help but nod first. Zhou Xian's words were exactly what he was worried about. It seemed that his great companion had a good sense of politics. Seeing that Zhou Xian did not interrupt him, Zhou Xian knew that he had spoken the emperor's mind. He continued proudly, Presumably, both your Majesty and the Prince of Min can see the problem of the Duke of Zhongdan. As long as we remind him a little, he will definitely do something. At that time, we can eliminate the problem in his heart and also let the Prince of Min be seriously injured in the process of killing him. It is really killing two birds with one stone. Good. Zhou Xian clapped his hands with an encouraging look. But then he shook his head. We can see this, but can the traitor Prince of Min not see it? Chapter 458. Of course. But it doesn't matter. The advanced firearms in the hands of the mercenaries are like a piece of fat meat. In order to get them, I'm afraid Prince of Min can't stop his greed. Of course, Zhou Xian thought of this and laughed. He was sure that Prince of Min would go to the mountain knowing that there was a tiger in the mountain. Hearing this, Zhou Xian nodded again. He thought it was reasonable. But there was another problem. If Prince of Min really got these advanced firearms, wouldn't it be a threat to him? When Zhou Xian expressed his doubts, Cao Jixiang smiled cunningly and said, Your Majesty, you can rest assured about this. If Prince of Min really killed Duke Zhongwei, it would be useless even if he got those firearms because the leader of the mercenaries would be there. No one would allow their benefactor to be killed and remain indifferent. Hearing this, Zhou Xian finally laughed out loud. Cao Jixiang was right. Prince of Min was such a greedy person that he would not let Yang Chendong live under his nose. Seeing that Zhou Xian finally laughed heartily, Cao Jixiang knew that his plan had been approved. He struck while the iron was hot and said, In order to lure Prince of Min into the trap, we only need to promise them that King of Shiping will block Duke of Zhongdong's retreat and prevent him from escaping once the opportunity arises. In this way, not only will our plan succeed, but if the mercenaries want to take revenge in the future, they will only look for them. Your Majesty only needs to say that you don't know anything, and then you can get rid of this matter completely. Cao Jixiang had thought everything out for him. Zhou Xian had no reason to refuse. He immediately ordered Commander Menda to do this. He found a reliable person to contact Prince of Min and make preparations for the future. At the same time, he wrote a secret edict and asked someone to send it to King of Shiping of Yunnan. If Yang Chendong really defeated the Jiaoji army and returned, he would give him a fatal blow. At the same time, Prince of Min also took action. After Qin Tian returned to the camp, he told Prince of Min everything. After much consideration, Prince of Min agreed. In his eyes, both the mercenaries and the Jiaoji army were thorns in his flesh. If they could fight, it would be a good thing no matter who won. As for the 100,000 civilians that Yang Chendong requested, that was even simpler. Just pick some people who didn't have enough to eat or warm clothes and send them over. Once the war started, refugees could be seen everywhere. 100,000 people was really not a big deal. Once he did this, he would fall out with the Jiaoji army. The king of Min, who had already occupied most of Yunnan, Guangxi and Guangdong, had a very solid foundation. He only needed time to recruit new soldiers and digest these territories. His strength would increase by several times. At that time, he would not be afraid to face the weak southern Ming alone. King of Min made a decision and Yingzong also responded. Finally, it was Yang Chendong's turn to make a move. Yang Chendong, who owned Daikra, had long set a goal for himself. In order to achieve these goals, the first thing he needed to do was to have power and influence. He had achieved this. The second thing was to weaken the Great Ming's strength. Then he would openly have the power to lead his own troops. He had also achieved this. The third thing was how to lead his army to conquer the world and gain the Great Ming's tacit approval. For this step he had put in a lot of effort. Now it seemed that he had finally achieved it. When he received Zhou Xian's imperial edict from Kuang Yi that allowed him to lead the troops, the next day, 1,500 cold vanguard troops, 5,000 auxiliary troops, and 5,600 temporary auxiliary troops, a total of 12,000 men, set out from the south of Gaozhou Prefecture, brushing past Miao Jinlong's camp and heading towards Guangxi. 2 days before they left, Yang Chendong arranged for his 2 wives to leave with the last batch of soldiers from Laizhou Prefectural City. This time they were going to fight Jiaoji. The terrain there was complicated and there were dense forests everywhere. In some places, it would be difficult for carriages to travel. Fighting on someone else's home ground, there was the possibility of falling into danger at any time. It was naturally very inconvenient to bring the women along. However, Yang Chendong had to carefully consider where to send them. Looking carefully, whether it was the Yang clan manor near the capital or Jianing Prefectural City, neither was a very safe place. As long as he didn't die, his family and loved ones should be safe. However, this was only under normal circumstances. Who knew if there would be people who would take the risk? After thinking about it, there was only one place that was safest. Zairyukyu Island's Crimson City. Moreover, Sumaner had already arranged for them to go there. As the saying went, an ugly daughter-in-law would have to meet her parents-in-law sooner or later. Even if he didn't tell them about Crimson City, he probably wouldn't be able to hide it from the 2 women for long. Since that was the case, it was better to have them go there first so that they could get used to it and think about what they would have to face after becoming his wives. Were they mentally prepared? In truth, Yang Chendong had guessed that Hu Yen and Madame Shui would probably be shocked at first, then shocked, but in the end they would still support him. After all, women in ancient times rarely had such independent thoughts. Most of them were loyal to one person and would follow the person they married for the rest of their lives. Yang Qindong had made up his mind. However, it took him a lot of effort to arrange for the two women to go there. Just as he thought, Hu Yan and Madame Shui actually asked to face all the difficulties with Yang Qindong. The two women didn't want to leave Yang Qindong. They were more worried about him. How could he say anything harsh to women who were worried about him? Fortunately, Yang Qindong knew how to beat around the bush. He adopted the method of attacking them one by one. First he persuaded Madame Shui. Then the two of them worked together to deal with Hu Yan. As expected, they succeeded in the end. Using the excuse of sending them to the safest and most comfortable place, Hu Yan and Madame Shui left before the battle. Following them were Tai Qingyi, a group of female guards, and Yang Wu, who represented Yang Qindong's identity. After settling the family affairs, Yang Qindong finally set his eyes on the territory outside the Great Ming Dynasty. Only 2 days later, the army set out. In the front and back there were 29 battalions, totaling more than 12,000 men. As they walked past Miao Jinlong's camp, the other party was like a rooster ready to fight. They put on a defensive posture. It was obvious that the previous battle had indeed frightened them. Seeing the mercenaries walk past them, they instinctively went into a defensive state. It was destined that such a defense was useless. Yang Qindong's target was not them at all. More than 12,000 people passed by the camp openly. Miao Jinlong and the others breathed a sigh of relief when they couldn't see any trace of them. Not far behind, on the city gate tower of Gaozhou, Kuang Yi could not help but sigh as he watched Yang Qindong leave with the army. He had been with Zhou Xian for a long time. He knew his emperor too well. He was a man who hated to see others better than him. This time Yang Qindong went in alone. He did not know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. But at this moment he couldn't care less because he had to leave Gaozhou prefecture immediately. At this moment he could only wish Yang Qindong good luck. Jiaozhi. It was also known as Jiaozhi. It was a term used by the people of the Middle Plains to describe the customs of the southern barbarians. Later on, it was used to refer to the area south of the Middle Plains where the southern barbarians lived. During the Ming Dynasty it was also known as the Land of Annan. Emperor Qing Zhudi once sent a large army led by Britain's Zhang Fu as the commander-in-chief to send troops to suppress Wuxia, entering Annan and breaking Wuxia's elephant formation. Wuxia, father and son, were captured and escorted to the Ming Dynasty's capital Jinling, present-day Nanjing, Jiangsu, along with numerous Hu Dynasty's civil and military officials and generals. After the Huji family was destroyed, the Ming Dynasty announced the abolition of the Annan Kingdom and renamed it Jiaozhi Province. It governed 15 houses, 41 prefectures and 210 counties. They won the war, but they made a bad move. In terms of how to rule this place, the Ming Dynasty brought a corrupt rule to the new Jiaozhi province. The first was the local officials. Most of them came from the neighboring Guangxi, Guangdong and Yunnan provinces. They only knew how to read and they only had one goal: to get rich. The second was the eunuchs. Military supervisor eunuch Ma Qi, who was the commander of the Annan military region and the grand governor of Jiaozhi province. He extorted from the people. Just the peacock tails alone required 10,000 a year. If the number was not enough, he would capture the Jiaozhi people and torture them. Wherever there was oppression, there would be resistance. In the end, a person called Li Li appeared. He worked together with the Jiaozhi people to fight against the Ming Dynasty army and obtain victory. The Ming Dynasty was forced to make peace with Li Li, and the army backed out of Jiaozhi. 1431, first month, 5th day, Li Li accepted the title of Ming Dynasty. However, this action dealt a huge blow to the authority of the central government toward the southwest chieftains. After which, Shi Duo's actions proved that the negative effects of Xuanda abandoning Jiaozhi were long-term and fatal. This matter dealt a heavy blow to the Ming Dynasty's international reputation in the western region and shook their suzerain status. Losing Annan meant losing the western region. This was something that even Zhu Zhanji did not expect. From then on, Annan continued to disturb the borders. Maybe because they were too poor, or maybe because they relied on their geographical advantage. Once they had a chance, they would disturb the borders and bite the Ming Dynasty. Every time such a thing happened, the Ming Dynasty would bear with it. After all, they were facing a tropical monsoon climate, so the temperature was high and the humidity was high. It was also a country with mountains and forests, so it was inconvenient to send out troops. If they did not have enough troops, they would not be of much use. As time went on, they did not care and only arranged guards in the Yunnan, Guangxi and Guangdong provinces near their borders to defend. As they say, if you defend for a long time you will definitely lose. Not to mention that the Ming dynasty itself had problems. First, the strong Ming dynasty was split into two. Next, the Min king rebelled. How would Annan not grab hold of such a chance? Under the invitation of the king of Min, he reluctantly sent the troops. The 50,000 troops did help the king of Min build a lot of momentum at the beginning. Chapter 459. South Ming was already weak and Zhou Xian's main focus was on Baiming. Along with the chaos of the Huang bandit army in Guangdong, the Min king worked with Jiaoji, and the Miao people suddenly attacked. Naturally, they obtained a huge victory, charging out of Yunnan and into Guangxi and Guangdong. The war was going smoothly and Annan King Lily, who was blinded by greed, wanted more benefits. Under the instigation of his subordinates, he proposed a marriage alliance with the Min king. He wanted to marry the Min king's sister Yongxing Infanta, and said that they would be friends for generations to come. When Lily was given the title of Annan King, he also made a vow that they would be friends for generations to come. However, not long after he changed his mind. Naturally, the words of such a person could not be trusted. Furthermore, Lily was already over 60 years old, and Yongxing Infanta was not even 20. This was pushing his sister into a fire pit, so how could the Min king agree? However, considering that they were still an alliance army, if they did not handle this well and became enemies, it would only benefit the Yingzong emperor. It was at this moment that his subordinates came up with an idea, which resulted in the matter of Yang Qindong sending troops to attack the Jiaoji army. Especially after Yang Qindong proposed a declaration of war, he thought that he could not let Annan grow too big and he could not marry off because of this matter. This would affect the morale of the army, and he would attract the dissatisfaction of his brothers. In the end, the Min king sent out a declaration of war, saying that the Annan King Lily was not good. This could be considered a falling out. The moment the declaration was sent out, the most shocked person was the Annan general Yuan Gengwang, who was still waiting for news in Guangnan House. The surname Yuan was the biggest surname in Jiaoji. With a large population, naturally there would be more talents. Yuan Gengwang was one of them. With the support of his family and his own ability, he took on the mission of leading the army. He led 50,000 troops out of Jiaoji and into Great Ming territory. They were weak to begin with and they did not have enough preparation. The moment the Jiaoji army appeared, they caught the South Ming army off guard. Not only did they occupy the city and steal a lot of gold, but they also captured 100,000 South Ming civilians. A portion of them were sent back to Jiaoji as slaves, leaving 50,000 strong men to form the Han captive army. With that, Yuan Gengwang, who had 50,000 Jiaoji troops and 50,000 Han captives, had a lot of morale. Even when he received news that the king of Min had sent someone to contact the Duke of Baiming to deal with Jiaoji, he did not take it seriously. To be able to become a general, especially one who led an army of 50,000, Yuan Gengwang had some ability. In his view, strength was the most important thing. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes and machinations were nothing more than clowns dancing. It was not a big deal. Amidst this pride, a declaration of war appeared. But Yuan Gengwang was only surprised. Then he was angry and a little angry. He said in front of his two confidants, Deputy General Hong Jin and his nephew Yuan Yongyang, "What *T Duke of Loyalty and Courage? Just let him come. I will kill all of them here and see what kind of explanation King Min will give. Humph. If the compensation doesn't satisfy this general, then we'll have to talk about it." Of course. Uncle is so brave. Who can defeat you? It's fine if the Duke of Loyalty and Courage doesn't come. But if he comes, he won't be able to return. Yuan Yongyang, who looked 60 to 70% similar to Yuan Gengwang, immediately began to flatter him. It was not very accurate to say that he was flattering. At least the other Deputy General Hong Jin, who was good at war, did not object. Perhaps in his eyes he also thought so. Feeling very comfortable with his nephew's words, Yuan Gengwang said, "Let's do it this way. Tell the army to get ready. Once the Duke of Loyalty and Courage comes, we will teach them a lesson. Let them know that they are not invincible just because they defeated the Huang bandits. In terms of military strength, we, the Jiaoji men, are the best in the world." Mu family of Yunnan. The three big words King of Sheeping hung high outside the Netherworld Gate, showing their strength and power. Recently the King of Sheeping Mubin had been living a good life. During the chaos in the south, the Mu family, who had military power and had lived here for generations, obviously became popular in everyone's eyes. Whether it was Zhou Xian, the king of Min, Li, or even Zhu Qiu, the acting Grand Master of Baiming in the north, they all sent people to draw them to their side. This was not long after, Mu Bin was crowned as the first living king of Sheeping in the Ming dynasty with a different surname. Mu Bin should have been satisfied with being crowned as a king of Sheeping. This was definitely something that could be written in the history books and bring honor to his ancestors. In fact, Mu Bin did send out troops. In order to live up to the title of King of Sheeping, he led 100,000 Mu family troops to fight against the King of Min. Unfortunately, he had to return in defeat because of the stupid teammates of the southern Ming dynasty. Then he could only watch the King of Min's forces go out of Yunnan and quickly occupy Guangxi and Guangdong. Now that things had come to this, Mu Bin did not have any better ideas outside of Yunnan. Because once he led the army out, what would happen if Yunnan fell into chaos? Who would be responsible for the military supplies along the way? Under all kinds of worries, Mu Bin did not make a move. Fortunately, his existence could restrain the army of the King of Min's lineage. People like the King of Guangdong Zhu Huili and the Miao chief of Dumain village Yang Wenbao were restrained by him in Yunnan and Guangxi, and did not dare to act rashly. It was precisely because of this that Zhou Xian did not openly cause trouble for Mu Bin. Although it was certain that he was not satisfied, he was too far away from the emperor. There was nothing he could do. He could not reprimand the other party and cause the Mu family to seek refuge with King Min. If that happened, the South Ming dynasty would be in real danger. In such a big environment, Mu Bin lived very comfortably. Zhu Huichen, and Yang Wenbao, who knew the strength of the Mu family, did not want to fight with him. On the contrary, they would send people to send some gold and silver from time to time to maintain their relationship. Mu Bin did not want to accept it at first, but under Wang Ji's reminder he finally accepted it all. Wang Ji was a very interesting person. He was originally the assistant minister of the Ministry of War of the Southern Ming dynasty and had some ability. When Kuang Yi was old and retired, he would naturally be able to smoothly fill the position. However, he was impatient and did not choose to stay put. Instead, he decided to take the initiative to make more contributions and become the minister of the Ministry of War as soon as possible. Therefore, he suggested Feng Mubin to be a king with a different surname and solve the matter of Yunnan as soon as possible. The idea was good, but the reality was cruel. In the end, the plan failed. Zhu Qian vented his anger on Wang Ji and asked him to be removed from his post and sent back to the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. Knowing that there would be no good result if he went back, Wang Ji began to beg Wang Mubin of Sheeping, saying that he was willing to take the blame and work for him. He also promised that once the war was over, with his connections, he would be able to contact more important officials to speak for the King of Sheeping when he returned to the capital with the gold and silver. Considering that his title as a king with a different surname came a little suddenly and Zhu Qian did not give it so willingly, who knew if he would come after him in the future? If there was someone in the capital who could speak for him and move around, it would be a good thing. In addition, the original suggestion of him being a king with a different surname came from Wang Ji himself. So Mu Bin agreed to this request. Using the excuse that Wang Ji was not well, he temporarily stayed in the Mu family. For the sake of future plans, he accepted the gold and silver sent by Prince of Min. After accepting the gold and silver, Mu Bin and Wang Ji's relationship seemed to be closer. This time, after seeing Prince of Min's declaration of war against the Jiaoji army, he called Wang Ji over and asked him about the plan. Lord Wang, His Majesty has given me a secret order and asked me to make some preparations. Once the Duke of Loyal Courage really defeats the Jiaoji army, we should take the opportunity to suppress them. What do you think about this matter? In the back garden of Prince of Sheeping's mansion, Mu Bin and Wang Ji sat opposite each other with a humble look on their faces. Although Wang Ji had done something wrong and provoked Zhu Qian's anger, he still had some ability. In particular, his connections in the capital and his understanding of Yingzong's thoughts were something that Wang Ji could never catch up with. Therefore, if there was anything, Wang Ji was very willing to discuss it with this important official in the capital. Now that his life was in Mu Bin's hands, Wang Ji would answer any question, even if it was for the sake of survival. Now that he heard the question, he pondered for a moment and said, "Shiping King, there's nothing to worry about. Everything is clear. Please enlighten me, Lord Wang." Although Mu Bin already had a plan in mind, he still wanted to hear the views and opinions of the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War. Sensing the gloomy look on Mu Bin's face, Wang Ji knew that Mu Bin was trying to test him. After thinking for a while, Wang Ji smiled and said, "Prince of Shiping, the situation is clear. The Emperor's decree also stated that this time, the Duke of Loyal Courage only has about 10,000 men, while Yuan Gengwang has gathered 100,000 soldiers. The difference in military strength is already huge. Next, one is attacking and the other is defending. One is familiar with the terrain while the other is new here. Under such circumstances, I don't see any possibility of Yuan Gengwang losing." In ancient times, when fighting a war, they paid attention to the right time, the right place, and the right people. The more of these aspects, the more obvious the advantage would be, and the greater the possibility of victory would be. Looking at these aspects, it seemed that Yang Chendong only had the right to send troops, and he was at a disadvantage in all other aspects. Under such circumstances, it was no wonder that Wang Ji would make such a conclusion. Mu Bin kept nodding, looking very much in agreement. "So this time our target is the Jiaoji army who is going to win?" "Hey, you can't think like that." Wang Ji's expression changed instantly. "Prince of Shiping, I know you want to fulfill the Emperor's decree and attack whoever wins. However, the Jiaoji army is not that easy to defeat. Let's not talk about whether or not we can win. Even if we defeat Yuan Gengwang with King Li Li's temper, he will definitely send more soldiers. If that's the case, when will revenge ever end? Wouldn't we be putting ourselves in danger?" Chapter 460. Hearing that Wang Ji did not allow him to fight, Mu Bin was confused. He asked, "Then what should we do?" "Do nothing, just wait and see. Unless the Duke of Loyalty wins with a few people, we can send troops if there is a chance. Otherwise, don't act rashly. No one is easy to provoke. As long as we don't help anyone, we will be everyone's friend. In this way, when the Jiaoji army is angry, they will not find trouble with us. They will only attack the King of Min. We will sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight to preserve our strength. No matter what, we will be in an invincible position." When these words were said, it was clear that Wang Ji was indeed planning for Mu Bin. Mu Bin kept nodding his head in agreement when he heard this. Speaking of which, his Mu family had been loyal for generations. This could be seen from history. However, the current situation was completely different from history because of the appearance of Yang Chendong. There were two emperors of the great Ming dynasty. Both of them said that they were the legitimate ones. For a moment, Mu Bin did not know who to listen to. Under such circumstances, who should he be loyal to? Since he didn't even know what was going on, he might as well bide his time and observe the situation before making a move. Wang Ji saw that Mu Bin had stopped thinking about fighting and could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was now relying on Mu Bin. Of course, he hoped that Mu Bin was as strong as possible. This meant that he would be safer. However, he did not know that this time he was completely wrong. Everything was because he underestimated the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Chendong. Perhaps Wang Ji's thinking was right. Among all the forces, Yang Chendong had less soldiers and no territory. He should be the easiest to bully. However, he forgot that if Yang Chendong was easy to bully, how could he save Zhou Xian from the battlefield? How was it possible for them to defeat the elite cavalry of Watts? How could he destroy the Huang bandit army that was getting more and more powerful in less than 2 months? How could he make Baiming substitute Grandmaster Zhu Qiyu and Southern Ming hero Zhu Qian afraid? How could someone who could do such a thing be a soft persimmon that would be easily manipulated by others? If one underestimated the enemy in the business world, it was very likely that one would be penniless. However, if one underestimated the enemy on the battlefield, it could cost one's life. Just like Yang Chendong's troops, after they left Gaozhou Prefecture, they passed Lianzhou Prefecture and Siming Prefecture. When everybody thought that he would detour around Zhen and Prefecture in the northwest and have a decisive battle with Yuan Gengwang's subordinates in Guangnan Prefecture, the mercenary army suddenly disappeared from everybody's sight. The mighty army of more than 10,000 people disappeared like evaporated water vapor. This news quickly spread to the South Ming Army, Min Army, Miao Army, Mu Family Army and Jiaoji Army. Disappeared? How is this possible? Compared to the other military camps, Wan Gengwang of Jiaoji military camp in Guangnan Prefecture was the most anxious one. In the past few days he had already made preparations to fight the mercenaries outside the city. He even gave the order to not defend the city and go out to attack. Although abandoning the city and not defending it was equivalent to losing his advantage, he was still confident when he thought that his military strength was 7 to 8 times that of Yang Chendong's. However, he did not expect that after everything had been prepared, news suddenly came from the front. Yang Chendong and the mercenaries he had brought with him had disappeared. This made him feel that something was wrong. He hurriedly strode to the sand table and stared at the vicinity of Ximing Mansion. The news had been cut off here. Naturally, his gaze would also fall on this place. Standing aside with tiger-like eyes, it was Deputy General Hong Jin. Different from Deputy General Ruan Yongyang, he was the nephew of General Ruan Gengwang and had a natural advantage. He could only rely on diligence and better performance to gain the general's approval. Just like before when he led the troops to fight the South Ming Empire, he performed very well. More importantly, he was very obedient. That was how he got such a position. Although Hong Jin was very obedient, he also had his own ideas. Otherwise, he could not have reached the current height with only his honesty. Under his observation, he noticed that Wan Gengwang's gaze fell on the vicinity of Ximing Mansion. His heart moved and he said, "General, could it be that those people directly entered the dense forest and entered Liang Mountain?" Hong Jin's guess was exactly what Wan Gengwang was thinking. These words made his breathing quicken. At this moment, another deputy general who was also his nephew Ruan Yongyang fiercely stood up and said, "Impossible, they don't have the guts to enter Liang Mountain. Let's not talk about the problems of food and logistics for more than 10,000 people, just the fact that it's already the 7th month and the rainy season is coming at the right time. The weather is humid and hot, and even us locals aren't willing to stay in the mountains and forests at this time, not to mention the snakes, ants, tigers and other creatures. Once we launch a pincer attack from the front and the right, I really don't see any way out." After saying this, Ruan Yongyang seemed to feel that it was not enough. He added, "Logically speaking, the loyal duke leading the troops should know this. If he doesn't even know this common sense, then I can only say that our opponents this time are too weak. They are not worthy of our attention." Wan Yongyang's words were very reasonable. Jiaoji was located south of the northern border. It was hot and rainy, especially from May to October when the rain would flood. At this time, the nests of many animals in the dense forest were not safe, causing them to roam everywhere. It was very dangerous. The reason why it was said to be very dangerous was that unless it was a particularly experienced local elder, not many people would be willing to enter the dense forest under such conditions. It was not much different from rushing through the gates of hell. Not to mention an army of more than 10,000 people. Once they entered without knowing anything, anything could happen. If they did not handle it well, it was normal to lose 60 to 70% of their non-combat personnel. In addition, without enough logistical support, no army would take the initiative to enter the mountain. It was precisely because of this harsh environment that Jiaoji was able to remain independent despite its small population and small army. Its overall strength was far inferior to the Great Ming dynasty. Hearing Wan Yongyang say so much in one breath, General Ruan Gengwang nodded repeatedly. Just when the other generals thought that he was thinking the same, he suddenly said to his deputy general Hong Jin, "Immediately arrange for scouts to enter the Langshan area and search for possible traces and evidence of their entry." The sudden decision stunned the other generals. After hearing this, Hong Jin's body instantly stiffened and he said, "Yes, General. This subordinate will do it immediately." After Hong Jin went out to arrange things, Ruan Yongyang, who was in the hall, said in a questioning tone, "Uncle, you don't really think that these mercenaries are brave enough to enter the forest, right? If that's the case, we don't even need to do anything. Most of them will die in there." "Call me General. Also, I am the commander-in-chief here. I naturally know what to do," Wan Gengwang reminded. Wan Gengwang said in a warning tone. Wan Yongyang's mouth, which had originally wanted to say something else, was now half open. Clearly his uncle was angry. When the main general was angry, even if you were his son, you would have to restrain yourself. This was the army. Without iron-like military discipline, there would be no way to win any battles. As for Hong Jin, he immediately sent out a team of 200 elite scouts to Langshan. Most of them had lived in the forest for generations and many of them frequently went in and out of Langshan. Arranging for them to scout for information was the most appropriate thing to do. Go and return quickly. If you discover anything suspicious, report back immediately. This time we don't need you to find out where the enemy is. As long as you can confirm that they have entered the Langsun region, it will be a great achievement. Hong Jin gave the order to the scouts. Following this, 200 horses galloped out and disappeared without a trace. Langshan. This forest had a long history. If one had to describe it, it could be described as a primeval forest. Especially now that it had not been developed and polluted, the number of mountains and forests and the density of the trees was unimaginable to ordinary people. For example, if one walked in this forest, regardless of whether it was day or night, unless one found a favorable position, it would be very difficult to see the sun. This was all because the density of the trees was too high. It was so high that it could completely block out the sun. Another example would be walking for tens of meters, at most 100 meters. In less than 10 meters, one could see thick tree trunks that were so thick that even two people couldn't wrap their arms around them. There were even thicker ones that were so thick that even 3 or 4 people's arms wouldn't be able to wrap around them. There were also many trees like this. From this, one could see how desolate and primeval this place was. When Yang Qindong led more than 12,000 mercenaries into this forest, he saw such a scene. Oh, the forest here is much denser than the ones we encountered during training. The trees are also much thicker. Not long after entering, Tiger's Mane's voice rang in Yang Qindong's ears. On the other side, Beta Persei also cooperated with him. Young master, the road here is muddy and the temperature is so high. Not everyone can stay here. I finally understand your painstaking efforts a while ago. It was no wonder that Beta Persei would say this at this time. A while ago, Yang Qindong had not seen outsiders for a long time on the grounds that he was poisoned by an assassin. In fact, he had been secretly training the army. The main subject of the training was how to survive in the forest and how to best exert one's strength. At that time, many mid-level officers, low-level officers, and even some higher-level officers did not understand this kind of training. Especially during training, Yang Qindong deliberately chose some rainy weather and when the temperature was high to increase the intensity of the training. For this reason, many soldiers were injured. There were even some auxiliary soldiers who could not persevere at all and were directly injured and retired from active service. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.